Hang on. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Teach Me English Icons 2021. I'm just going to pass over to Lizzie, who's going to do her initial introduction while I set up the TM English Icons Periscope feed, which has disconnected us. Hang on a second. Lizzie, you go over, you start, and then I'll come back in.
Brilliant. Morning, everyone. Thank you very much on a Saturday morning at 9:30 to be joining us. Hopefully, you've had a look at the programme. If not, it's available on our Twitter. So do head over to @TMEnglishIcons on Twitter and you'll find our programme. You'll be able to see stuff that we've got coming up today, which I'm really excited about. There's definitely something for everyone in there. English is such a broad subject by the time you take into account language, literature, media, creative writing, and then we've got it across all key stages as well. We're excited to have talks on Key Stage 5 and Primary today, as well as our standard Key Stage 3 and 4 GCSE elements as well. So as I said, my name's Lizzie Harvey. I am the TM Icons English coordinator. So this is actually our second event. Unfortunately, COVID kind of got in the way of our face-to-face second event as it would have been, which we would have been in the TES offices in Sheffield. But actually, I think this is a really great opportunity for us to be live and online, because it means that those of you from further afield will be here and able to tune in. So we're going live on YouTube, which might be where you're finding us now, and hopefully Periscope. Tom, if you've managed to get it up and running now.
We are now live, hopefully across everything.
Across everything. So there are lots of ways of getting involved today. Firstly, as I said, we've got our Twitter handle @TMEnglishIcons, but we also have a hashtag today, which is slightly different from our Twitter handle. It's just ENG rather than English, just to drop those characters down so you can say more lovely things about what you're learning today. But also, if you're watching on YouTube, if you comment on the YouTube video, we can see those comments and feed them in to today's speakers as well. And we also on Periscope, if you click into the link of Periscope, because on Twitter you can see it live on the stream, but if you click into it, any comments that you put on there should hopefully, in our very snazzy system backstage here, should show up for us to be able to share with our speakers and with you guys too. So please do tweet about us, please do ask questions. All of our speakers today, I'm sure, will share their Twitter handles where you can contact them directly. If you haven't already as well, there is a link to our big marker sign up. So everything that we do today will be recorded, and any resources from the speakers will be available for you to access after the event, but only if you sign up. So they're free forever, so there's no catch there, but we obviously do need to capture your email to be able to send it to you. So do also, if you're joining us live, do go and find that at some point today to sign up to get those resources. But we're looking for a really good day today. I'm really excited. So yeah.
Yeah, happy days. Thank you, Lizzie. I was going to obviously introduce Lizzie as our English coordinator. Lizzie has been coordinator since 2019. And this is now our second major event in English. I know Lizzie's going to do a call out for team members later on. So if you're interested in actually getting involved with the English team, being a part of the English team, then there's going to be opportunities for you to do that if you're watching this and you're interested in that. We've got 250 people already joining the event today, which is pretty insane because we haven't even started yet. But yeah, so thanks everybody for tuning in. There's a few things that I want to talk to you about just for 2 minutes initially. First one is, what is Teach Me Icons? We are a not-for-profit organization. All of us are volunteers and either full-time or part-time classroom teachers, including myself. Lizzie is a full-time English teacher. All of us do this basically because we love doing it. We enjoy it. We publish our accounts on the Teach Me Icons website every year. They'll be coming out next month, so you can see how we fund our events for free, like this one. One of the key ways that we fund our events is through sponsorship. We have several individuals and companies who support us and ensure that our events can actually go ahead as they are. I'm going to introduce all 4 of our sponsors in the next few minutes, starting with Brett from Pupil Progress. Brett, good morning.
Morning, Tom. How you guys doing?
How are you getting on?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Yeah.
Good stuff. Brett, Pupil Progress, just as an introduction to everybody watching, People Progress have supported Teach Me Icons now since, I think, 2017. So it's been quite a while. It's been one of our biggest supporters, going back 3 or 4 years now. Obviously, your support, Brett, and the support of People Progress has allowed us to put on events like this and all our other subject events in history, in RE, in D&T, in all the other subjects which we'll talk about later. So I'm going to pass over to Brett now, and you can introduce yourself. Great,
thanks, Tom. No, I mean, yeah, just on that, thanks for the opportunity too, because I know that you choose your sponsors, carefully. So, it's thanks to us, from us as well. Testament to the teaching community, 1,700 signed up today. It's incredible. So thank you again. Bit of a prime spot as well. The reason for the personal address, actually, I've just asked Tom for a couple of minutes, was we really do think that we've got something that can really support right now. So I'm just going to very quickly share screen. Our tracking has actually moved on significantly from the last time that we might have spoken to you. So I wanted to show you what we have here, and it is something that we'll be able to support with knowing the gaps that this COVID scenario has created. It's got lots of functionality that are going to support enabling you to add and collate all your data from multiple tests. And also we've got a forecast area that will actually allow you to administer the Centre Assess Grades process. So I just wanted to share it's something that you can use right now. Watch out for the videos. And the other part of the personal address was we've been working really, really hard to secure a government grant to help make the software more effective for you as teachers. And that grant has actually enabled us. We've made the decision to support 2 subject areas per school, no cost, all the way up until the 31st of August. It's called our Grant Enabled Access. You can either use the link that Tom shares in the Teach Me event today, or you can actually just click on Start a Free Trial and you'll be able to see a select in that process to select the Grant Enabled Access anyway. Lastly, if you are a Pixel school, so you guys out there that are Pixel schools watching this, we are on the Pixel Save. So if you do like the software past the 31st of August, you'll be able to get a 15% discount. And also, we are potentially going to work with Pixel because we really want that Wave process to be just a click of a button. So if you do engage with Pixel Wave and you want it just to be a seamlessly easy process, the more teachers we have on People Progress, the easier that will be, because when it comes to your Wave, you can literally just click a button to submit. So we'd love to be able to support, reducing workload so you can get back to what you do best, which is teaching. So thanks once again, Lizzie, Tom. I know it's a real prime spot, and I hope everyone enjoys today. I know it's going to be a cracking event.
Cheers, Brett. Thanks, mate. Catch you later. Cheers, pal.
Well, that was about 2.5 minutes, Tom. So
hey, for you, that was incredible. See you, mate. Cheers.
Nice one. Bye.
Okay, so that's People Progress. Our second event sponsor for today is Wellbe. That's Welbee. I'm going to play you a really short video now, which was created by their CEO, Mark Solomons, to introduce you to what Wellbe is.
A third of new teachers leave within 5 years. School recruitment targets missed since 2012. UK teacher job satisfaction among the lowest globally, and stress and mental ill health is the #1 cause of long-term absence. And all this was before the impact, uncertainty, anxiety and added workload from COVID-19. There is a solution that will help you solve these problems and effectively tackle the causes of poor staff well-being. Introducing Wellbe. Wellbe follows an evidence-built process, which means you can easily assess the current well-being of your staff, know what to focus on for the biggest impact, track progress and capture ongoing staff feedback. As a result, your school will keep more of its staff who are happier and more engaged, improve student outcomes, and likely save £20,000 to over £100,000 annually. 12 months of Wellbe includes an online survey, detailed report with benchmarks and recommended actions, anonymous feedback tool, resources and ongoing remote support to simplify and speed up your journey and deliver the outcomes you need. All with a money-back guarantee. Schools we work with have found this transformational. To book your free demonstration or to find out more, get in touch today.
Okay, that's Welby. We will hear a little bit more throughout the day from both Pupil Progress and Welby. Our other two sponsors for today are GCSE Simplified. And I want to give a shout out to Kate Jones, who's in the background on our TM English Icons Twitter account, who'll be tweeting out about GCSE Simplified today in terms of the offers that they have on at the moment for English teachers. So do follow the hashtag TMEnglishIcons for more on that. Also, a shout out to TES Resources, who are our venue partner. Now, obviously, there ain't no venues at the moment. So at some point in the future, we will be back in Sheffield for our face-to-face events. Now, just a few other things. The recording and resources for today are available for free, and they will be there forever. So there's a link again in our pinned tweet on Twitter, which will show you where you can sign up. All you need to do is enter your email and your name, and then you've got access to that recording and the PDF resources of every presentation where permission has been granted. Will be available within that recording. That will be available within 24 hours of the event today. If you want to support Teach Me Icons today, then you can certainly head over and buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com. Again, we publish all our accounts so you can see that 100% of your donation goes back into producing more events like this. So if you fancy buying us a coffee, then head over there. We'll shout out about that later. I can see Mark Grist in our back, what we called in it, backstage. Very pathetic in it in an online.
Fancier, you know, when we're sat at home.
I feel a little bit pathetic saying, but it's not glam. I mean, look at my background for a start. You know what I mean? But anyway, I'm going to pass over to Lizzie now, who is going to introduce Mark.
Brilliant. So I'm really excited about having Mark Grist come and join us today. So hi, Mark. Thank you very much for opening us all up as our second big event. Mark, for those of you who don't know, is a poet and battle rapper, which is super cool. And I've definitely used him in my lessons before. So I'm excited about this, to have you come and talk with us. So you're one of us. Once an English teacher, always an English teacher. So you know what it's like. I mean, I'm going to let you do a lot of the talking to introduce yourself, and we do have a quick video to play before we come back to you. But an accolade that I think I would be really proud of if I was you. You're the most viewed UK rap battle of all time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's a bit crazy.
It is really crazy. And small weird fact I found out this morning: Blizzard, who you were rapping against, used to sit next to my fiance in English lessons.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Oh, that's great. I was interviewing him the other day. Oh, he's a great guy. Oh, that's cool.
So we're going to play that video now, hopefully, if Tom's in the background. And then we'll
sure
thing. Mark. Thank you.
And I wasn't going to class. I get to battle that nerdy who failed at controlling the class. I hope you drop dead. If I punch you in the face, who are you going to call? Ofsted?
That's right. 90 seconds on Mark Grist. Let's go, man.
At home who is sitting watching YouTube, don't start clicking. I know this might look like some kind of extreme babysitting. It is. Hey, it's actually a rap battle. Two grown men lyrically bitching. Just one of us isn't legally old enough to drink inside the building. And now, Buddy's going to try and act less infantile by pretending that he's proper riled. So sit back, watch him reconcile with his lack of breastfeeding as a child. That's why this ugly duckling suckling from the teat of any bumpkin with a beat or means of dumping his meaningless something. And the speed of words you're mumbling hides the fact they don't mean nothing. He may have beat the witch from Oz, but it's time for me to teach this munchkin. You will never amount to something. And I'm here to raise a grievance. Big up everyone whose parents have property in Manchester, mate. That's not a achievement.
It's not.
This blizzard litter's got no fire, it's just hot air he's breathing, and when all's said and done, as the years drag on, you'll look even more like Deborah Meaden. This rapper's pint-sized. He's cockeyed. When he raps, his mouth only actually moves on one side. He's like a prepubescent Popeye, complete with physique that implies that all the spinach in the world has died. And look at him try, this poor little chap, like so many anemics I've seen in my class, dreams of riding up high on a unicorn's back or defending the world from an orchid attack. You off in sandals to pictures of Gandalf you stack with the mags in your porn stash. He's for wizards. He only called himself Blizzard because that's the company that made World of Warcraft.
Wow. I haven't watched that whole round in a long time.
It's really good.
Thank you. Gosh, that was a big moment, I think, in my life. That is from the most viewed UK rap battle of all time. Yeah, shall I talk about what happened with that, or how that?
Yeah, over to you. It's all yours.
Okay, cool. Hey guys, really nice to see you. So my name's Mark. Yeah, I'm a poet and I'm a rapper and I'm a rap battler as well. It's kind of a weird mix of stuff. That battle took place, I think, about 9 years ago. I had just left teaching and stumbled my way into the battle rap circuit. I should explain first of all that I used to be an English teacher for 5 years. And I worked at a school in Peterborough that I loved, and we had a mission statement. I think at the time was the only school with a mission statement that included the word fun in it. And our head teacher was quite eccentric, and he was always kind of pushing us to try and do unusual things. I did not have rap battles like that in my classroom, but I did spend a lot of time working with particularly young boys who, what I found really frustrating and really weird was that I had all these young boys that were really creative and were using language in such interesting ways. And yet a lot of those young boys also kind of said that they kind of hated English and particularly hated poetry, or poetry felt like such a heavy word, you know, like to kind of bring into the classroom. You know, those kind of words you can use or phrases you can use as a teacher where the whole class kind of groans a bit. Poetry was one of those things. And often it was with students who were really creative and really inventive. And I kind of started a hip hop, like rap kind of club. And we just kind of like, the students basically taught me. It was agreed at the club I was the least cool teacher in the whole school. And through a series of events, they started training me up in how to rap. And I noticed at parents' evenings, when parents came in as well, this weight of poetry, I could feel it within the parents when I would talk to them about poetry and how poetry was exciting and fun. And those parents would kind of come back to me with that they thought poetry was beyond them, or it was too difficult, or they weren't good enough to study poetry. And it really bothered me. And so one day my headmaster called me into his office and he said, Mark, have you ever thought maybe you shouldn't be an English teacher? Which doesn't sound great, does it? But I said, what? And he said, no, seriously, have you ever thought maybe you're meant to be a poet? You write all these poetry and poems, you're really passionate about poetry, and you spend all your time kind of focusing on language and stuff like that. Have you ever thought about trying to be a poet? And I thought, I don't know, is that even a job? Can you do that? So he said something amazing. He said he'd hold my job open for a year at the school, and I could go out and I could try it. And he said, just do whatever you like. So I entered an underground rap battle circuit. I needed a rap battle name. I was trying to come up with names using my surname at first. I nearly called myself, my surname's Grist, so I nearly called myself Christina Aguilera, Cristiano Ronaldo. My students didn't like either of those. They wanted me to call myself Gristal Meth. That was what they wanted me to go with. I said Agatha Christie, but they didn't know who that was. And so in the end, we called me like the Count of Monte Cristo, but really, when I started battling, everyone agreed it was a stupid name, and I'd go as Mark Grist. And that battle with Blizzard kind of took place about 2 months into me trying to be a poet. And I went down to London, to Brixton. We had the battle. It went crazy. Blizzard, I think, was 17 at the time. So we sat outside, and he had like a lemonade. I had a pint. And we chatted about how funny it had been, but yeah, it was crazy, the result of it afterwards. And I often think about how it span out, that battle. And I think there's a number of reasons why it span out. I think on the one hand, I did say you bleep off in sandals to pictures of Gandalf. That's a pretty rude thing. And for a teacher to say that is pretty rude. But I think one of the main reasons that I think it went so viral and it became so big, it was in all the national press and everything, is that for me, a white middle class representative of education engaging in rap in some way is so unusual that it becomes newsworthy to like a national and even international level. And I feel very uncomfortable about that because that shouldn't be the case, surely. Like if this is, the more I've learned about rap over the last couple of years I have a podcast called Mark Can't Rap, which is where I go to rappers and they teach me the processes. The more I've realized that like, I find poems easier to write than rap. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm not convinced that the word poem is even that useful for us in the classroom. I remember the very first gig I had after I left teaching. And I was really excited. I was brought into a primary school and they were like, here's a poet. And I kind of went out and the first question the student asked me was, what's a poem? And I struggled with the answer to it. And I think sometimes we struggle with an answer to that in school. And I think when I speak to parents, I think what they think a poem is or what a poem has to be, I think is quite difficult for them. And I think for young people, I think it can be quite restrictive. I don't think it enables us to discuss things like rap and lyrics. And so I've got used to the idea of cutting the word poem out. And if there's one thing I can suggest to you guys today is in your classroom, you don't have to cut it out entirely, but I think the word poetic is more useful. I think a label of poem is quite static. I don't think it really enables us to be kind of inventive, whereas the word poetic can be a little bit more fun, a little bit more playful. So if it's all right with you, I'm going to read you guys my response. It's taken me nearly 10 years, but here's my response to that year 6 girl with what I think a poem is now. You might have your own ideas, but this is my take on it goes.
I'm going to pass over to you, Mark, now. I'm going to go off screen.
Okay, yeah, sure thing.
Cheers.
A poem is a funny thing, a sticky ball of language that's tricky on the surface when you try to understand it. Sometimes they're silly or they're sad or like a game or a puzzle to explore, but they're never quite the same in how they're written. And it would be absurd to say a poem must be this or that. One thing that I've learned is the differences in poems that I've read or that I've heard are what I love. For me, they're just a chance to play with words. And what is it for you that makes a poem sound exciting? What are the techniques you want to pack into your writing? Perhaps some repetition that the reader can delight in, or perhaps like me, you write things that are flowing and they're rhyming. Perhaps it tells a story. Perhaps there is a message or metaphors or similes, the use of a perspective. Perhaps something just sounds cool or funny or expressive. When words are working really hard, that's what is poetic. And if those works work hard enough, a poem can be smashing. No limits to its being except what you can imagine. Reckon you could write one? I bet you could. I know it. And once you've got it, given it a go, congrats, you are a poet. Cool. Thank you guys very much. That's my take on being poetic instead of focusing on poems. Now, since I've been kind of like doing this stuff, I've always missed teaching like a great deal, and I'm really feeling for everyone else that's kind of currently in schools. I feel quite guilty, I think, at the moment that I'm not there kind of like working through all this, and I don't really have any massive advice to offer. What I'd say at the moment though is I guess what I'd say at the moment is like, if we're trying to teach and we're trying to connect with people, we've got to make sure we look after ourselves first. And so if you're having a tough time, that's totally understandable and that's totally fine. Please, like make sure you look after yourselves and make sure you're kind of getting through okay. For me, I'm going to give you one last poem to go out on. And for me, that the rap battle going viral was lovely. I now kind of like have lots of gigs and stuff like that as well. I get to put work out that I think hopefully makes things more fun. If you need some help over the coming weeks for poetry, if you want to head over to markgriss.com, I've got some new resources coming out that hopefully should be useful. I've got like a series of animated poetry videos that are just fun, silly poems, but also that will have free resource packs coming out with them. They're funded by Arts Council England. I think I can show you a little promo vid for you here.
No sound on there, Mark.
Oh no. Okay. Well, believe me, it sounded wonderful. Otherwise, but look, hopefully they might be of use. If you want to go over to markgriss.com, the first video drops on Wednesday. It's called "You Need a Nappy," and it's all about persuasive language techniques in relation to trying to sell things that people might not normally want to buy. Hope that they are useful in some way. Otherwise, I might go out with a poem for you guys, if it's okay, about teaching, about what it means to me. I found when I was teaching and I was writing poems in the evenings, I'd go to these like posh events sometimes and I'd read poems, and a lot of the adults would be quite rude. They wouldn't like really pay much attention to me, but they would also be quite negative about the young people that I taught, and that really kind of frustrated me. So I wrote a poem about why teaching means something for me, and I think about it every now and then when I miss it. It's called A Teacher A, and it goes like this. The starter's removed, the main course emerges. When I'm asked what I do for a living, our host's reaction verges on the incredulous. Half-digested food that's been fed to us spittoons from his lips, and he leans in, snarls and quips. A teacher, eh? Wouldn't catch me wasting my time with today's youth, just a bunch of grubby little squits. The wolves laugh around him, applaud the wit that he just fired. His wife smooths my arm like it was tablecloth. She purrs, no wonder he looks so tired. The room erupts again, and I laugh too, because she's right. I am pretty tired. I'm tired from a day spent saying, tuck in that shirt, from getting kids into lines and making girls unroll their skirts. I'm tired of setting tests, to the grumbling, the complaining. Exams get me stressed. Giving detentions can be draining. And who'd have guessed it'd be so tiring, making lessons entertaining? The kids don't care because someone's farted or had a nosebleed, or it's just started raining. And I'm tired of working with artists, with athletes, with dancers. I'm tired of asking questions till I realize maybe I don't know all the answers. And then I'm tired from watching the sparks that fly behind young eyes, the heroes born in the classroom, the self-worth they realize. And then those other kids, the ones where you have to tie on a line, dive deep inside, rescue the shreds of confidence that another adult rusted up inside. I'm tired of scrabbling at those locks and dredging back those pearls, then saying, well done, I'll see you next week, letting them back out into the world. I'm tired of teaching year 8 boys that flirting isn't just kicking girls. And I'm tired of working with young people who invest in their community, who aren't happy accepting our banal shirt sleeve mediocrity. And while the efforts of the majority sink to the back of the local paper, that one kid with a blade who hates the world because nobody taught him better gets plastered on page 1. So when I am tired, when all our hard work is done, I get to stand on duty, watch those grown-ups' fearful looks directed at my young minds laughing as they travel home with their books. But look, mostly right now, I'm tired because yesterday in class, we were discussing poverty in Uganda. And throughout it, my students were irate. They were raw with anger. They just couldn't understand the fact that young people die of starvation in our world by the score. And when one girl asked me, sir, how can this even happen? How can you adults let the poor stay poor? It just got me thinking all night about what I once stood for. So yeah, you may all be successful. This meal may well be Michelin, but I'd swap the swine around me now for a dozen kids on Ritalin, because those grubby little squits won't learn your layers of indifference. And yeah, I am tired, but I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted, but teaching's what I do. I feed others before I feed myself, so that, fingers crossed, I never become as overfed as you.
Wow, thank you. That's
cool.
amazing.
You're very, very welcome. I hope that's been useful. Try and use the word poetic instead of poem, and otherwise look after yourselves, guys. Like, I'm really feeling for you at the moment. If you want to check out my website, there'll be new poems and resources coming up as of Wednesday. Cool. I hope you have a great day today.
Thank you very much. Well, I think from your first poet, no limits to its being, just imagine, I think possibly also is metaphorical for hopefully some of the things that we're going to go on and learn today as well with language.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Brilliant. Thank you so much,
cool.
Mark.
Thanks, Lizzie. See you later. Bye.
So, wow, that great start, off to a brilliant start. So next up, we have Stuart Pryke coming along as our first keynote. So thank you, Stuart, for joining us this morning and cracking us off with some sort of subject-specific CPD today. So thank you for being one of our keynotes. So for those of you who don't know, Stuart is an English teacher. He has published a great book that I've found really useful in my classroom, Ready to Teach Macbeth. And I think you've got another one coming. Am I right in saying that, about another text?
Yeah, hopefully Ready to Teach a Christmas Carol at the end of this year. We're in the midst of writing at the moment. So
brilliant. I thought I'd seen that somewhere. Obviously, you've been quite involved with Open National Academy, which has been, again, I'm sure many of us have used your lessons. So thank you very much for the help with that. And obviously, you do some Lit Drive stuff as well. But thank you very much for coming this morning. It's now all over to you, and you can introduce yourself. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen, and this is actually the thing that has been causing me the most anxiety, actually, hoping that this works. So just bear with me for a second. Right, I'm hoping.
I'll let you know, Stuart. Don't worry. I'll let you know if it appears. We can pop it on. There we go.
Yeah, brilliant. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you to the TMEnglishIcons team just for inviting me to speak today. I think one of the things I've missed the most over this whole kind of lockdown period is just going to conferences and meeting people and catching up and, you know, just talking about all things English. So it's really great that we can kind of do it in this format instead. I'm going to be talking today about the diminished diet, and I'll explain a little bit more about kind of what I mean by that in a second. I hope you find something here that can be adapted to your own context and the context in which you teach. At the very least, I hope it just gives you the germ of an idea, something that, you know, will help the students receive a diet that is in no way diminished, and, you know, something that will push and challenge students as well. So what is a diminished diet? This is really a phrase that I borrowed from Mary Meyer. I saw her speak at Research Ed Birmingham last year, and I just thought she was incredible. And she talked about a diminished diet and what we offer students in our curriculum. And over the past year, I've really been thinking about how this phrase can be applied to English and what it means for us as English teachers. And so obviously the idea of a diet is what we're offering students. And I began to think about this on a macro and a micro level. So I think, you know, a diet in a macro level is the curriculum. It's the text choices that we study in class. It's our big questions, our sequencing of events and sequencing of what we're going to be teaching. On a micro level, I think we're talking about a diet in terms of our lesson plans, our resources, and our, you know, our differentiation, our scaffolding and things like that, what we do on that kind of day-to-day basis. And really, it got me kind of thinking, is what we are offering our students good enough? And I've been thinking about that across the whole year. Is what we offer students good enough? And when I mean good enough, I mean, is it challenging enough what we're offering our students? Is it ambitious enough? Is it exciting enough? Is it tailored to the needs of our students, or has it just been picked up off a shelf? And so, you know, over the past year, all of these questions have been kind of, you know, just going around in my mind all the time. Are we teaching the right texts? Are we differentiating and changing the destination for some, or are we allowing everyone to reach the same goal through scaffolding? Are resources and plans made with high ambition? And I think the thing about a diminished diet in terms of what we offer our students is that sometimes we can serve our students that diminished diet without knowing it. So, for example, are we building upon what students have studied at primary school, or are we just doing the same thing, particularly in year 7? You know, do we know the curricula of our feeder primaries? Can students be offered a diminished diet through high challenge lessons if they didn't really understand what has come before? I've done that before. I'm really guilty of that in my teaching, you know, where I've thought a student has grasped a concept, so I push on with something new. And actually, there's no point in pushing on with something new because they haven't got what's come before. And just because the work is completed, does that mean that they've got it? You know, do we move on to the next PowerPoint slide because it's there and we need to finish it, or because students have genuinely understood it? And finally, and I'm really guilty of this, do we elaborate on a response to a question posed so it fits in with what we wanted to hear in the first place? So, for example, you know, I may ask a student, let's call him James, in my classroom a question. He'll respond, and sometimes I'm very guilty of saying, right, so what you're really saying there is X, Y, and Z. And actually, that just shows that the student hasn't understood it. And so, you know, that's a diminished diet if I'm moving on with the next task or the next part of the unit. And I think what the main message I really want to get across today is the fact that students can and will meet our expectations in the classroom, but we have to give them the chance to do so. We have to, as teachers, be able to put things in place for them to be able to meet those expectations. And so I think, if we talk about the idea of a diminished diet and, really go forward with the idea of what we're offering students, I think that idea is becoming extremely important under the circumstances that we're in. In a post-lockdown education, we need to be really careful not to take those shortcuts. I think it would be really easy to cut things out to catch up. I'm sure we've all heard that phrase kind of splashed across the media. I don't necessarily agree, I think, with that phrase, that idea of catching up. I think on the flip side to that, it would also be really easy to overload students as well. We need to find a balance to make sure that the diet we're giving them in terms of what they're learning and in terms of what we're offering is the right thing. And so really, I just think we need to ask ourselves, what do we want our students to know? And do they know it? And if they don't, how are we going to help them know it without taking those shortcuts or plying them with information? We don't want to be taking shortcuts and offering them that diminished diet in response. And I think lockdown as well, we're going to be feeling the effects of this for a long, long time. Lockdown has ensured that avoiding that diminished diet is more important than ever. And I think in this world where we've become more insular and we've had to shut our doors and hide behind them, it's really vital now that we as English teachers reopen them again, not just academically, but emotionally too. Because, I've been coming around to the idea that actually a diet, what we offer, isn't just academic. It's about that emotional side of things as well. And I think we're in a really unique place as English teachers to be able to do that because, we have so much kind of creative control over what we do. Our text choices will really help in making sure that we avoid that diminished diet and open up those doors academically and emotionally. Our use of debate and organised oratory as well in the classroom will allow us to have those conversations and allow us to think about, what our students have been going through and allow them to share what's in their mind and allow them to share what they've been going through and their own experiences of lockdown as well. And also that idea of descriptive writing and creative writing. I've put Kate Clunchy's How to Grow Your Own Poem on there. I've been working kind of through this book with my Year 8s over the past couple of weeks, just really to help them kind of express themselves in a bit more of a creative way. So for example, if you have a copy of that book, the first activity in there is for students to write a poem based on the structure of a poem called The Table. And this is something on the screen. I won't read it to you, but this is something on the screen that my year 8 student wrote for me. And I just thought it was incredible. I really liked it. This idea of kind of expressing themselves through poetry. But what really got me is that this isn't necessary for our statistics. This idea of being poetic, to quote Mark from earlier on, isn't necessary for statistics. It isn't necessary for GCSE, but that doesn't render it any less important. In fact, I think, in this kind of post-lockdown society, it's even more important than it has ever been before. And so, I also think if we're looking at this term of diminished diet, an exam diet is a diminished diet as well, and dragging things down into Key Stage 3 is diminishing what we're offering our students and diminishing their diet. And it's really important, that we allow our students and give students the opportunity to express themselves. So for the second part of this presentation, I just wanted to talk to you about some ideas and strategies that I've used in the classroom before. These aren't necessarily extra challenge activities. I think there are other things that we can do to stretch our students, but instead they're mostly designed just to help us to avoid offering that diminished diet. And they're about helping everyone to succeed, no matter where they're from or ability. It's about making sure that everyone can reach their potential. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is pre-reading strategies. And this is something that I've really kind of incorporated into my practice over the past year. And I think they're necessary to help us avoid that diminished diet. I've always assumed in the past that, some of my students will find a particular passage from Dickens challenging or a scene from Shakespeare too difficult. And so, I used to be that teacher that gave them an abridged version of the text or a graphic novel version so they could understand the plot and the characters and the themes. Yet on reflection, that's offering students a diminished diet. in my opinion, I'm denying those students the chance to kind of engage before they've even begun. And so these strategies are really designed to help avoid that as such. So pre-reading strategies, these are just some really random examples that I've picked out for you. Let's say I'm going to go with Macbeth, just because obviously I've spent a lot of time thinking about this play over the past year. I like this idea of agreeing or disagreeing with some statements. So I always, before I read a scene, put some statements on the board and I ask students whether they agree or disagree with them. And really, they're making inferences, and all inferences require knowledge. So, this is an example taken from, I think it's the post-murder of Duncan. So it's the bit where Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are going to wash their hands. And I just ask students whether they agree or disagree with these statements. And the reason I do that is because it's opening up that dialogue about something before it occurs. So if students have already discussed these ideas and already debated them in the classroom before we come to read that scene, they're going to find the scene, I think, easier to access and easier to kind of understand. And really what we're doing with these pre-reading strategies is laying foundations for students and making sure that they have everything they need for the next, for the next few ideas that we're going to then explore with them. It assures that students are using their previous knowledge to make their predictions. There's an element of recall in there as well. It creates class debate. So it's allowing students to read the scene from multiple perspectives. And most of all, I think, and this is what Mary Myatt talked about when I first heard that idea of a diminished diet, is it decreases the threat of reading. And in this case, it decreases the threat of reading a large scene, as interpretations have already been discussed once you read it. So having that dialogue before reading and looking at these ideas before reading are really, really powerful. And then again, it's going to avoid that diminished diet, because we don't then have to give students the graphic novel, the abridged version later on. They're already having those discussions, decreasing the threat because we're making predictions. Something else I've liked doing as well is actually redacting lines. So getting students to just think about the lengths of the lines that are in a play or a text or a poem, just asking them what they notice, and it decreases the threat again, because there's not a right answer here as such. It's making those predictions. And I always like to decrease the threat by saying it doesn't matter at this stage if you're incorrect. We're just having those ideas, we're just making those predictions and having that that discussion. So pre-reading is something that I really, really do advocate for. Sometimes I'll use other texts as well to preface a harder text. So for example, if I'm teaching Julius Caesar, there are themes about tyranny, power, ambition, democracy, dictatorship, quite big, complex ideas for students to get their heads around. And so I might use other texts before reading a particular scene or a particular section of the play or novel, if I'm doing something else, to help students understand it. I'll ask myself, are there any local links to this? Any local ideas where we can talk about tyranny or power or ambition or democracy? Any other articles, any short stories? Any famous figures that they may be aware of that we can compare to some of the characters in this text as well? Again, all talking about these things before we read the text, just to help students access it. I wanted to talk a little bit about this bottom one as well. I do always ask my students if there are other texts they may have read that contain similar themes to the text we're studying, films they may have seen, or games they may have played on their Xbox or PlayStation or whatever. And I think some may argue that films and games aren't valid examples for this. But if we want to offer our students a good, rich diet and not a diminished one, we want our students to join in the conversation. And so I would always argue that entry points into said conversation should always be valid. We need to be really careful, I think, as teachers, not to exclude experience, no matter what it is, just because it doesn't strike us perhaps as being academic. I think, if a student doesn't read, but they have seen a film that contains a tyrant in there, going with the Julius Caesar example, I'm going to want to talk to them about it, because it will then help open that door to that more academic text. Then we come to reading the text. This might be a strategy that some of you are familiar with. It does contain an element of pre-reading again. And Amy and I are talking about this in Ready to Teach a Christmas Carol when that comes out. It's very similar in a sense to the idea of register and read, if some of you use that method in your form time. And I'm going to go with the idea of A Christmas Carol just because that's what I'm kind of focused on at the moment. So I would argue that vocabulary, excuse me, is one of the biggest barriers to understanding 19th century literature. And so it would then be really easy for us to create that sort of diminished diet for our students by giving them abridged versions, the graphic novels, watching the film instead of reading the book, just to get past that particular hard section. And so I was thinking about what can we do to make sure that this is accessible to everyone, to make sure that we're not stifling someone's opportunity to understand something before we even put that text in front of them. And I looked to Register and Read. I cannot, off the top of my head, I really apologize, I cannot off the top of my head come up with the, I can't think of the name of the person who came up with Register and Read, so I will go and find that out in a bit. But it's such a good method of helping students to access a text, and a complex text as well. So, for example, just in the first paragraph of A Christmas Carol, there are so many challenging, complex words that students have to understand in able to access that text. And if you're familiar with the work of Alex Quigley, he's very, very much says, do not just give students lists of words and glossaries, because they're not going to learn it. They're not going to take it in. And I completely agree with that. But I think, I do agree with that. And I think some people have kind of misunderstood this technique, I think, before, this strategy, because it looks as if that's what we're doing, and we're not. So what I would do is read get the paragraph, plan the paragraph that I want to read with my students. And I'm going to pick out maybe 5 or 6 words that I think are really going to influence their understanding of that text. So this is from the very first couple of paragraphs of A Christmas Carol. And I think these are the words that students are going to find particularly challenging to understand. So what I would do is I would put this up on the screen, but I'm going to get students to start doing things with these words. First of all, I might ask them to transform the words into an image. I might ask them to group the words in particular ways, if they can do that, if they see a particular way in which they can be categorized. If appropriate, I might ask students to make some inferences based on those words as to what they think is going to happen in the text. So again, in order to avoid this diminished diet, we're just opening up the discussion about vocabulary before they come to read it. Then what I would do is read the section of the text that I want to read. And I'll just read it as it is, but I would highlight the words that we've discussed. So I would just read this as it is, as Dickens wrote it. But what I'm then going to do is reread it. And instead of rereading it as it is, I'm going to substitute the word for the definition of it. So for example, the definition that I put for clergyman was a person with a religious duty, especially in Christianity. So what I might do when I reread it is say the register of his burial was signed by the person with a religious duty, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. So I'm substituting all of those words for their definitions to help them access that text. Again, it's just another way into it. Another example here, the idea of ironmongery, I would replace that. It would become something like, I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of something made of metal in the trade. So just that idea of swapping the words with their definitions, having that discussion with students as to what they think it means. And then I'd read it again, and I'd read it exactly as it is with the original words, just to help students understand and to help them meet my expectation that everyone is going to read through this and no one is going to read through an abridged version. And I think the issue with this, obviously, is that it would be really, really difficult to do this with every single word. So I don't do it for the whole text, but particularly if we're going to come up to a challenging extract. That's a strategy that I really think helps to avoid that diminished diet. My advice for this would be to choose words carefully. Obviously, the method can't be used for every word because we do have that element of time. So really ask yourself, if you're going to use something like this, which words are key in helping students understand the extract that we're reading. I've put a blog down there. I'll post this PowerPoint out. I've put a blog down there from Alex Quigley that just talks a little bit more about teaching vocabulary and again, helping students to avoid that diminished diet. I think just a quick note on reading as well. I think as teachers, time pressures us. We are always in a hurry to get to the next slide on the PowerPoint, because I think the further along we are in a lesson or a scheme of work, the more progress we feel that we're making. Yet if we're truly teaching our students to read, that's going to take time, because we want our students to see the subtleties, the nuances, the suggestions that are present in a text. And I think actually a lesson spent reading is not a lesson wasted, because we want to enable our students to access what we're putting in front of them. I have been guilty before of, moving on to the next slide in the PowerPoint, and I have to think that we, as teachers, sometimes need to get past that idea of just because students are doing doesn't necessarily mean that they're learning. And so, I really encourage, any English teacher to take their time with reading and help students to access that complex text. If you want to find out more about that, I just recommend these three people, Alex, Chloe, and Alice. They have all influenced my practice as a teacher more than I think they'll ever know. I'm sure you're familiar with Alex's two books, Closing the Vocabulary Gap and Closing the Reading Gap. They're brilliant. If you don't have them, if you haven't read them, I would just go away and order them now, because they're so excellent at helping students access texts, and therefore, for us as teachers, helping our students to avoid that diminished diet. Chloe's done some brilliant work on reciprocal reading, which is almost like an extension of that read, reread, and read again. There's so many more strategies that you could do with that sort of thing. Chloe goes through them all. And then Alice is the person who I got the idea of pre-reading from. And I've spoken to her a lot about this over Twitter. And I think, go and check out her resources, because she's a huge advocate for pre-reading and just reading in general. So please do go and check those people out. And then to finish off, we have this idea of responding to a text. Now, Amy and I talk about this in Ready to Teach Macbeth, and we're kind of firm advocates for the fact that we are all consumers of literary criticism, regardless of our age or our ability. And so every student in our classrooms can add their own voices to the discussions that are already out there. And, I've seen lots of people do this on Twitter, and I've also seen lots of critics of it on Twitter as well, saying, but it's not required of the exam. You don't need to do it. You don't need to do that. But I also think that just because an exam board doesn't require it, does that mean we shouldn't do it? Or is there value in actually considering text through a different lens? So, for example, at the end of Act 4, Scene 3, I will give my students this quotation. It's from an essay by Marina Favilla. And she's saying, Macbeth has hacked Macduff into a suitable double of himself. Discuss. And I think actually taking quotes from literary criticism to have students discuss them can be really, really powerful and really, really important, because students will then see value in what they're doing. They see value in their own voice, value in their own opinions. They're adding to that discussion. And, for students who may find that a little bit more challenging, you can frame it in a different way. For example, how is Macduff now a suitable double of Macbeth? How are they similar? So again, we're helping our students to avoid this diminished diet, because everyone is working towards the same goal and everyone is working towards the exact same thing. And I think using extracts from literary criticism to instigate discussion can be one of the most powerful things for our writing as well. There's that phrase, that idea that writing floats on a sea of talk. So in terms of helping our students avoid that diminished diet, getting them to talk, getting them to speak, getting them to voice and share their ideas is something which, is an opportunity, actually, I should say, that shouldn't be wasted. And just to finish off, kind of just linked to what I just said, an idea of slow writing. I was reading a blog by Mary Myatt again. I'm a huge fan, I'm just going to say. And she says that writing is slow and it's difficult. But when pupils are supported and guided through the writing process carefully, the product of writing is likely to reflect what they really understand. And she says that we need to move away from a temptation for children to complete work which might not be original to them. So I was thinking about how I model kind of essay writing in the classroom. And I was thinking of obviously the I do, we do, you do method, which I think is extremely powerful. But what I've sometimes done when I do is I'll model a whole paragraph on the board, and I'll take ideas from students when we get onto the we do, but I model a whole paragraph first. So I was actually thinking, what would be the power of slowing that right down and literally modeling essay writing or even creative writing step by step, so that you might even spend a whole lesson on just one paragraph. And this is what it looks like. So I've done a lot of work around authorial intent with my class as well. And I was reading this book by Neil Bowen and Chris Curtis the other day. And what I really like from that is this idea of wants and needs. So students, I think, really struggle to write about characters. They struggle to see that characters are conscious constructs. They've been created by the writer to present an idea. Instead, you'll find that lots of students write about characters as if they're real people. And we need to kind of get them to avoid doing that. They slip into that bad habit, and we need to actually take a step back and say, this character is a construct. It's been created for a reason. And Chris and Neil in their book say, you know, what does the writer want us to know, and what does the writer need us to think or feel, and why? And it's that why point, I think, which is the most important aspect of an essay. So once I've discussed with students what the writer wants us to know about, say, Fred from A Christmas Carol, and what does the writer need us to think or feel about him, I'll then introduce this idea of slow writing. Now, I've talked about authorial intent at various conferences and things before, so I'm not going to go through that again, but I'm just going to use it as an example of kind of what I'm saying here. So what I would ask students to do is to copy and complete this frame that's on the board. Perhaps Dickens highlights Fred's benevolence to criticize, to teach, to warn. And they've got to finish off those different sentence stems. And that's going to require them to manipulate the knowledge that they have, you know, in order to finish off those sentences in different ways. Then what I'd ask them to do is just to pick one, and they're going to pick one to develop it. And this is where the idea of slow writing comes into play, because what I would do now is I would ask a student for one of their answers. So perhaps this one, perhaps Dickens highlights Fred's benevolence to challenge Scrooge's harsh and miserly attitude. And then what I would do is I'd model it on the board for them, but I would model the whole paragraph. And I think once we've got to the end of a paragraph, it may look really, really good on the board, but students have already forgotten what I was requiring of them, you know, as the first point, the first thing to complete. So I've modeled this idea of slow writing instead, and we literally split the process of creating a paragraph into 5 or 6 steps. So for example, the first one was to complete the sentence. The second one would be expand using because, but, so, or as. I'd write that on the board. I'd model it on the board. I'd explain what I'd want them to do, and then they go away and do their own bit. I've then got the idea of applying a reference and discussing it. So I model it on the board. We've got the idea of eyes sparkled there. We're discussing it as a class. I'll write it down, and then they go away and do their own version. So we're building it up bit by bit instead of just throwing everything at them at once. And it really helps to kind of reduce that cognitive overload. Next point, using your first analytical verb to lead into a second to encourage that more kind of exploratory response. So here we've got perhaps Dickens highlights Fred's benevolence to challenge Scrooge's harsh and miserly attitude. And then as you can see at the bottom, I've added to that, through challenging Scrooge's attitude, Dickens could also be revealing the importance of, and then moving on from there. And it's really just about making sure students are really, really clear as to what we need them to do, not throwing everything at them at once. Because I think if we throw everything at them at once, we might get a false impression of what they can do. If they're struggling with it, we might pick up from that actually they can't do it. And so we're going to diminish their diet and give them something else instead. Whereas it might just be that they can't process all of that at once. But if we split it up step by step, we know exactly what they can do. We know exactly what they're struggling with, and we can plan in response to help them reach the high challenge that we want them to reach. So to finish off then, because it's nearly my time, avoiding the diminished diet, just some kind of bullet points summing up really what I've been talking about. I think teach slowly and don't rush through content. I think, you know, as teachers, time is so precious. It's a precious commodity. But at the same time, you know, if we rush through things, we're offering students that diminished diet. We're not offering them what we could. I think laying the foundations for more complex texts and ideas through pre-reading is really, really important for our students, and also allowing our students to express themselves and not hindering that creativity by focusing on the statistic that we're going to receive as a school when they leave school. We want to have offered our students something that is really going to prepare them for their next stages in life. Also, not just teaching to an exam at Key Stage 3. And I think the time will come for exam technique, and even then it should be worked through slowly. But there is a time and a place for exam technique, and I don't personally think that Key Stage 3 is the right place for it. And just offering variety as well, whether that's through you know, our extracurricular activities, the text that we teach, but just making sure that we are giving students every opportunity to experience that high challenge and that ambition as we can. I was just going to finish then with some recommended reading. These are just books that I found really, really helpful for English teaching and curriculum in general. I think David's book, Making Meaning in English, David's book, Making Meaning in English, is one of the most powerful books I think I've read about English teaching. I would really recommend it. Also, Barbara's book as well there, What Matters in English Teaching, is fantastic. Then Chris and Jenny's book for resources and planning are brilliant. And then we've got Kat, Howard and Mary Myatt for the rationale behind curriculum and what we're doing, why we're doing. And the reason why I like these books is because they don't all necessarily agree with each other as to what constitutes good English teaching, but I think that's what makes us better English teachers, is reading widely so that we can have these discussions and push that debate forward and drive forward kind of the English teaching profession in general. So I think that is me out of time. I apologize if that was a little bit rushed. I was a bit nervous. I was talking quite quickly, but that's my Twitter handle. So if you have any questions or you just want a bit more information about some of the things that I've spoken about today, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Stuart. There is so much to take away there. Pre-reading, reading, read again, read over again. I loved the quotation you gave at the end, about giving variety to students, to give them every opportunity for high challenge and ambition. And I often think that we forget that those two things go together, that we're not just challenging pupils for the sake of challenging them and ticking Ofsted boxes. There's a level of actually we want them to be ambitious and to enjoy this and take something away that they can then expand on themselves. So thank you very much for that. And thank you so much. The Twitter's gone mad. So
I'll catch up on those now.
Everyone is absolutely, brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. And a nice seamless link there to a couple of things that I wanted to just shout before we open up to our next keynote. Stuart spoke a lot there about Mary Myatt being a really big influence, and actually Mary's resource and CPD platform, Mary Myatt & Co, actually support TMEnglishIcons and the TM Teach Me Icons as a whole. They have exclusive videos and resources that we produce over on her platform as well. So there is a quick plug for her there too, because she supports us. And actually she spoke at our very first TM Icons for English. So we're a big fan of Mary Myatt too. And then our lovely Kate, who's running our social media today, has asked me to remind you that we do have a competition going on. So if you use the TMEnglishIcons hashtag and then post a selfie of where you are today, watching at home or in your garden or wherever you might be, and then you have some wonderful prizes up for grabs there as well, including I think 2 copies of Stuart's Ready to Teach Macbeth are in the mix as well, so do check that out. Now we have our next keynote coming up now. Really excited to introduce Stacey Ray. There she is. Lovely. Thank you very much for joining us. So Stacey's title is Electric Teacher Energy, which I'm really looking forward to. I mean, the fact that we're all here on a Saturday morning probably tends to give us electric teacher energy, which should be good. So Stacey's a lead practitioner in English in the Northeast. In Sunderland. She has a very, very highly successful Instagram account where her handle is the same as your Twitter handle, I believe, Stacey. So that's Stacey Ray. There she shares loads of knowledge and guidance for students of English, which I definitely check out. I really would. And she was a runner-up for the Lord Glenamara Memorial Prize 2019-2020 in excellence in English. So she's definitely one to listen to now. The floor is yours, Stacey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi guys. First things first, I do talk quickly. It's just my Geordie way. Thank you so much for tuning in on a Saturday morning. I'm going to do a couple of things. Some you might find are more generic, so actually you might be able to share them with staff in your organisation, and some are going to be tailored to English. Again, I can put them on Twitter. They will be on my Instagram as well. So because I'm talking about teacher energy, I just want to start with some facts. And the reason I'm going to do that is because actually our students, and I am going to play on the pandemic just a little bit because of obviously this particular time. And I don't know if you know this, but it shocked me. Before the pandemic started, your average human being has 50,000 thoughts every single day, okay? So if we have 50,000 thoughts every single day before we are in a world pandemic, then consider this. Over 70% of those thoughts are negative, and it's even higher in the teenage population. And then when you throw in social media and you throw in the fact that we're in the midst of this pandemic and they've missed so much education, then actually the statistics for teenagers have risen. So you're talking about your average teenager has around 65,000 thoughts every single day, and over 70% are negative. So you're talking about your average teenager having between 35,000 and 40,000 negative thoughts. And that's on a daily basis. And the reason I wanted to start with that is because I'm talking about energy and I'm talking about motivation. And we're in this situation where we are the people that are going to change. We are going to change the lives of those in front of us. So I just wanted to start with that fact. And again, I can tweet it out for you because I couldn't believe it. And because then you think, actually, what do those students feel about themselves and what do they think when they are actually in a learning environment? So with that being said, I'm talking about energy and then I'm going to give you some strategies. So please be patient. I know it's Saturday. When I talk about energy, it's like a magnet. Energy is like a magnet. And so your energy, it literally introduces you into a room before you introduce yourself. So we've all been, and I'm sorry if this is slightly unprofessional, we have all been in a room, either CPD or different type of meeting or a lecture, or we've been to university and we've had a speaker who literally sends us to sleep. And you're thinking, I've taken nothing from that. They're not very charismatic, yet I'm supposed to listen to them. And I know that sounds really rude, but your energy introduces you before you do. And I know I am over the top, don't get me wrong, I am, but that is one of the strengths that students enjoy, because if you're loving it, they are. If you're giving them that enthusiasm, it genuinely, I find, rubs off around the room. For instance, if you were listening to a speaker who was like this, so we're going to do Shakespeare, it just doesn't take. And so my next two facts for you are this, guys. Your body language is 55% of the communication that you give to a student. So not what you say. I know that sounds horrendous and you'll be thinking, your body language is 55% of the communication. So again, imagine that you are buzzing. Sorry for the Geordie. Imagine that you are loving what you're delivering. It naturally rubs off on the students. Not all of them, obviously, but most of them are going to think, wow, I've just come from this horrendous, tedious lesson. This English lesson's bouncing. It's amazing. The energy, it filters across. And when I'm talking about body language, it'll go across as well to tone of voice. And I think Stuart just mentioned that earlier, so very slightly, about enthusiasm. Our tone of voice. Change your tone of voice. Be excited. Be the person that loves those students in terms of promoting their success. Be the person that we all go to CPD where they're talking about positive. Be positive. Give them a compliment, but give them a compliment that you mean, that actually comes from oh my God, that is amazing. Change your tone of voice as if you are genuinely buzzing that student has heard you, or you are genuinely excited that they have told you that piece of information about Macbeth. And you can do that with criticism as well, because criticism doesn't have to appear to be negative. And I'm all for being honest with our students, but again, think about how you deliver that. So again, I just wanted to lead in with those two things, because modelling enthusiasm, I genuinely think works. And you might think it's not for real here, but it genuinely works. From my experience, I know that 9 times out of 10 the students in front of me do buzz, and I know that is like contextual, but they do. And so I'm going to give you some strategies now that I hope will help. And again, I can tweet it out because I've just moved house. My laptop's not playing this little game. So my first strategy, guys, is called Quick Write. Now, the beauty of this, all right, guys, is if you just put a hashtag in front of it, so simple. The kids are like, what, social media? We're using social media in this lesson. So hashtag Quick Write, okay? And the beauty of this is this, guys. It will change the energy in the room, because it's not a starter, it's not a plenary, but it can be used like that. So at any moment in your lesson, okay, you can say, right, quick write. And what you get them to do, guys, is you get them to change the colour of their pen. if that's at all possible, okay? You get them to put everything, so if let's say they're writing about Macbeth in black. You say stop, hashtag quick write. They put down their black pen and they get a different colour, right? And this is where you help the reluctant and the disengaged. You put parameters on the writing. So you might say, write down everything that you can remember from today. And then what happens if it's, all right, just what I can remember. Okay, right, Macbeth has killed the king. And you know what? To one learner, that is success. Remember, we've got different versions of success here. But to your, let's say, your middle ability, to your higher ability, you might put a better parameter on that. So you might say something like, hashtag quick write, I need an explanation as to why Macbeth is conflicted in Act 1, Scene 7. Go. And again, they're going to write. And honestly, what happens, guys, is your reluctant writers, they will start with just a couple of things. And then as you do it more often, this sounds really, really silly. The movement, honestly, of dropping a pen and getting a different one, because movement is all about energy, it changes something. So they're not like, oh my God, we have to write about Macbeth again for 20 minutes. Right, pens down, quick write, summarize this lesson. Pens down, quick write. Why don't you try and summarize last Tuesday's lesson when we looked at the witches? And honestly, what it does is, right, okay. And then, because you've told them to change the colour of the pen, so stay with me a second, what you can do is then say, all I'm going to do in your feedback is just check your quick write. Because again, what your reluctant writers will think, right, okay, so she's not going to look at this academic essay I've attempted to write and I've struggled because English isn't my strength, but she's going to check this little bit I've put in red. And again, it alleviates pressure. And the reluctant writers and the people that appear disengaged when it's a lengthy lesson in terms of writing something are being judged on the parameters that you have given them. And let's be real, guys, success is different for different people. And success for some students is just putting their hand up. Success for some is entering the room, isn't it? And this is going to be even more challenging for us when they are reintegrated into school after all this time. So hashtag quick write always works for me. And again, if you're doing vocabulary, you can change your vocabulary with your high ability. So you could say something like quick write, criticise Macbeth's behaviour here. And again, your wording will put the parameters on that notion. So I hope that helps. Again, I can tweet it out. Apologies if I'm talking too quick. Right, next thing is this. This is a tricky one, and if you haven't used it before, it can be uncomfortable. Okay, so, and I don't know the names, I just call it thinking time. But the more I consider and reflect on that, I think that's a daunting prospect, depending on the ability of your class. So for instance, and I'm guilty of it, you can see here. I think we're all guilty of doing this. Right, somebody tell me what Romeo says in the balcony. Go. Whoa, why is nobody answering this? Come on, come on. And we expect an answer within a second of asking a question. And it's worse online, isn't it? Because nobody wants to be quiet and wait. And this is a problem. Statistics, guys, and research shows that your middle to higher ability, okay, research shows this, your middle to higher ability students want time to think. And again, in the research, okay, if you do some research around teaching and things like that, they don't like quick response. I'm talking, obviously, more than likely a grade 7 to 9 here. So just reflective teaching. Ask yourself how often you've asked a question and said, I want to give you time to think about that. So it is uncomfortable, because at first what you need them to do is sit in silence and think. But we have to let them do that, because literally the students are seeing in student voices, in surveys, in the research that, well, she didn't give us time to think about my response. So my response was A, less than average, and B, it's a staggered, and C, it was quick fire. It's like you saying to me now, and I love Serena Williams, okay, if anybody follows us, tell me something about Serena Williams in 1 second. Whoa, I need some time to think there. And no wonder they are like deers in the headlights, aren't they? Because they think, I haven't got time to answer that question that you've asked us, so I feel. And we know that our young people they hate failure. They don't see it as an option in terms of challenge and growing and strength. They think, I got it wrong. I'm going to get it wrong. I can't answer. I'm going to get it wrong. And it's like panic. So give them time to think. And honestly, the first few times you're going to think, the room, my God, the room's silent. What they're doing? Are they thinking about it? They're thinking about Netflix. You have to just trust the process. And it does take a while. It does. And my kids are like, it's like that. They're all like looking around, but think. And the other thing you can do, guys, again, for those students who are writers and note makers, is let them do that. So as part of your thinking time to the above question, just bullet point some of your ideas. Do you know what I mean? And then when they give you your answer, and tweet me if I'm wrong, it will be better than if they quick fired. Now, of course, there's room for quick fire, which I'm going to come to in a minute, but for our higher attainers, we've got to allow them opportunity to think and consider either what they've read, what they've listened to, you know what I mean? And do you know what we never do as well? And I might be wrong here, that's a sweeping generalisation. We're all like this, okay? There's your starter, get your starter done. There's that, come on, have we done the starter? And again, they're coming from a lesson where they've had to learn something. They're coming to us, we never give them thinking time at the start. And we know why that is, because everybody's going around saying, start a plenary, a quick learning. What is it? Can you show that they've learned something? And we're all on panic, because what if somebody sees? And we never just let them come into the room, and we never, say, I'm just going to give you 200 seconds to think about yesterday and to recall something. And then just that downtime for a couple of seconds. So quick write and think and time. And then this one, guys, and I've done a lot of work on this in my career, because whether or not you know me personally, I tend, or I have usually taught in schools where there is a high level of pupil premium, just to put that correctly. And one of the best things for boys, okay, I hope I'm not taking anyone's line, like just talking boys, is this. Choice. So I done my masters on boys and their reluctance to attend school, enjoy school, and things like try and things like that. But choice. Now it's gonna add a couple of seconds to your planning time. But listen carefully for the boys, guys, and I hope I'm not being sexist when I say that, because we do have reluctant girls. Giving them a choice of task. Now you play clever there, because technically it's not a choice. Do you know what I mean? So on the creative writing paper, for instance, instead of just throwing an image at them, give them a choice. And honestly, the boys in my class, because I can only speak personally, love it. Because what they think they're doing, I've got control of my learning here. Miss is letting me write about that picture from Fortnite. And I like Fortnite, because you know your students, and I pride myself on knowing my students. And that's half of the battle, isn't it? So give them a choice. Yeah, because then they think that they are in control of where their learning is going and what they are doing. They're not really, because they're completing the task that you were going to get them to complete. But and no, I don't think we're entertainers. We are educators, I get it. But it will add that fun element. So, you know, if in my career, I've had quite a few all-boy classes. And if you know that 8 of the 10 boys love gaming and the other 2 boys love football, make your pictures for the creative writing suit that. And I know you'll be sitting there thinking, well, we can't give them a choice when they've got to know about A Christmas Carol. Yeah, I know. But you can give them a choice of the essays that they answer. So you will know the strengths and the weaknesses. And the reason I say this is to build it up. Again, I'm not daft in the exam. No, they don't get a choice. Of course they don't. But if you build up their resilience, you build up their writing, because they think they've controlled their learning and they are a part of it, and they've been asked to, it's like team building, isn't it? Then again, the onus becomes more on them rather than you, I find. So quick write, think and time. Can we use task choice to suit our learners? And I hate this word, but give them the diet that they need in a different way. It's easier It's obviously easier with some questions, but it is possible. It's definitely possible. Next one, okay, and this I've touched on it. You will do in your careers, obviously, and you will have done. So I hope I'm not regurgitating. Questioning. How can we question them? How can we question them in a better way? How can we challenge them? And guys, put parameters on your questions. So you know, we're all guilty of just asking a flat out question, and we know Joe Blogs at the front who loves everything that we do. It's me. I've got the answer, and you're thinking, right, okay. Now, if you put parameters on the question, you add the challenge, yeah, but you also differentiate, because again, it's about knowing our learners. So when I say put parameters on the question, let's make up someone. We've got, I don't know, Joan, right? Joan's at the front of the room, and we all know that Joan does not like to get involved in English. She doesn't really like to speak. So we ask Joan a question, but we put parameters on it that allows her to be successful. So we might say something to Joan like, Joan, in 3 words, describe Lady Macbeth. It's just 3 words. Great. But then we know, as I say, Joe Blogs is loving it. He's been reading everything you've thrown at him. We might say, Joe, I'm going to ask you to summarise Act 4, Scene 1. Go. Then we might say to Bill at the back, Bill, I only want 15 words. You've got 15 words to tell me how Macbeth changes. Go. And what then happens is you differentiate the question for the student and their ability. B, you can decide on the challenge. But see, it changes their thought processes, because actually what they then have to do is think, all right, well, I've only got 15 words to give her that response. And again, it's that subtle challenge. Now, in one end of the spectrum, you're challenging them because depending on your parameters and your wording and the vocabulary you use. But on the other, you draw in those students that you feel either aren't engaged, don't want to engage. Because actually, remember, guys, this is about small wins. Sorry for being cheesy and American here, but Joan, who's just said 3 words about Lady Macbeth, is going to feel a sense of accomplishment. Get in, Joan, absolutely unreal. Those are class 3 words. Next time, can you give me 5? Either week after that, can you give me a quotation as well? And it's just moving the goalpost ever so slightly so that they feel, just answered her. And not only have I answered her, but enthusiasm is buzzing that I did. Next week, I'm going to show her that I can do more. And again, it's just that putting parameters on your questions. And I know we're running around all the time, guys, and we're asking 79 million questions. So sometimes we don't think about that. But why shouldn't we? You know what I mean? Why shouldn't we change the way that we ask our students a question? And again, it will work. And do you know what the students I find love is when you say something like 15 words and then they'll give you 11 and then you go, I want 4 more, and then they're like, oh really? And it just slightly changes the room, and it changes their thinking and, for me, their response to you. And again, I'm all for letting every single student succeed, whether that be something little or something large. And then my next one, and if anyone's on that I've taught with before, you'll think, oh my God, she's always going on about that, but it's my favourite, and it's so simple, guys. We've all read about dead time in lessons and time wasted and this and this and this. And honestly, and I stick by this if anyone ever watches me teach, the register. In our school, we've just started doing something that I model and I pride myself on, and it's called Every Student, Every Lesson. So Stacey Ray, one of my responsibilities is I want and I will speak to every single student I see every lesson. Every single one, every lesson. Doesn't matter if I've got a full D or not. Every single student, every lesson. Through the register. And no, they never say I'm here, miss, I'm here. They always give me something that is linked to the task or that is linked to their learning. And okay, it's only quick memory call, but I'm telling you, every single student, A, succeeds within the first 5 minutes of your lesson. So they have accomplished something straight away. So it can be so simple, and then you make it more difficult. So, you know, with year 8, we're currently doing pathetic fallacy. So it's very simple with year 8, because when they're doing the register at the minute, they give me a word that can be linked to pathetic fallacy. And you are going to have to juggle here, guys, because I don't let them repeat themselves. So if John says something about a storm on Monday, you can't see it on Tuesday. And you've just got to be on the ball. But what it means is that those 30 kids in front of you have achieved something. They have been successful straight away. And then you add in, as I'm talking about energy, how buzzing you are that they've done that. Obviously, when we start getting to 10 and 11, for me, it's always quotation recall and the haters. So I'll always say, Monday, everybody, I need a quotation from a war poem. Wednesday, everybody, I need a quotation from Shakespeare. And honestly, even the ones that don't want to speak do. And okay, it's only a quotation. It's not changing the world, but it is for that child. It is for their confidence. And if my first point about negative thoughts, we are chipping away at that. Because again, your response to, oh my God, Joan, that is a quotation from Lady Macbeth. Tomorrow, can you give me 2? And you can just change like that. And therefore, not only have you spoken to every single student you teach, they have given you a piece of information. Regardless of how big it is, they have succeeded. It is success to me. And I do that every lesson, to the point where year 11 are like, oh, just rolling their eyes. And again, you can change it. You can divide the boys and the girls. The boys, I want to do all of our male characters. The girls are going to do our female characters. As you get better, again, middle, high ability, the first person that answers the second person's got to analyse that quotation. And all of a sudden, it's verbal. The room is buzzing when we're talking about energy and changing the energy. Because like I've said, if they are dragging themselves to English last lesson like this, we need to change that. It's our responsibility. Yeah. So far, because I'm talking quick write, thinking time, giving them a choice of task, putting parameters on our questioning, and can we speak to them using the register better. The other thing I do, but again, it's a confidence, is they all speak to me on the way out of the door. So I make sure that on the way out of their door, they all speak to me. When we're not in a pandemic, it's cheesy. I high five them, because again, we're talking about enthusiasm. I'm nearly done, guys. The other thing, and this is where I will get an eye roll, so I do expect criticism here, but in my research of motivation and how can I change the room and how can I ensure that all of my learners are on board, there was this article I read about movement. Now, obviously, we're in English, we can't have them running a marathon in the middle of the lesson, but it was really, really interesting that getting a student to move, right, doesn't matter how little it is, can alter their own physicality, their own motivation, their own energy, and obviously the thing that they do after that. So I know that, just stay with me for one quick second. The one thing that I've been doing, and this comes down to behaviour management and things like that, is get them to clap. Now, I know you're going to think, they're going to be clapping, but all you can do, something so simple, is you can say, guys, stand up. This middle of the lesson. Stand up if you think they're not on board. So they'll get up, clap 3 times, sit back down. And it sounds stupid, and I can hear myself. And all of a sudden, they're like, all right, okay. In the research, it says to get them to do 5 squats or 5 burpees. Obviously, we can't do that. We can't have them all like, whoo, Macbeth. Like, that's a bit silly. But ear movement. You could, again, depending on class, just get them to move chair. Just take your book around and just move around. Again, it's in the research, it's about just changing feeling. Because if they're going to sit there and they have all day, there's almost an argument as to why some kids are like, oh my God, I'm going to listen to Miss Ray going on again. But yes, so I'll take a step back. We have got to, if we can, attempt to chip at all these negative thoughts that our students are having, which is horrendous. It really is. Your body language is 55% communication, so your energy enters the room before you do. It tells the students. We've all been in trouble with our mums, haven't we? And we know when we look at them, oh God, going to get wrong off mum here. Yeah, so communication, model the enthusiasm so that they love it. Quick write, thinking time, use the register to your advantage, make them work. Control in terms of the task choice, allow them to feel like they've got control on their learning. Put parameters on your questions, and if at all possible, can you get them to clap or high five or move a little bit, just so that they are kind of invigorated in terms of English. I hope this was useful. It's at Stacey Ray on Twitter and Instagram. I do appreciate your time this Saturday morning. All right, guys, I hope everybody's well.
Thank you so much, Stacey. That was amazing. Definitely electric teacher energy. And
Stacey, I'm just popping in to say phenomenal. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'd love to be in your classroom. Loving the energy, loving the passion, loving the ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely want to be back in the classroom now.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Fab stuff. Yeah, no, one of the comments that I saw, and I think Tom made it pop up on the stream, was no eye rolls, eyes open. And I think I've seen loads of tweets, and I've just put one out about wanting to be back in the classroom off the back of that. So thank you so much, Stacey. So to take something away, to kind of up our energy in our room, we've now got a break. So go and stand up, do some claps, maybe some squats or some burpees if you're up for it. We'll be back at 1:15. We'll be going live again in 1:15. So go and get coffee, go and get your caffeine break, go nip to the loo, and we'll see you in 15 minutes. Thanks all. Brilliant. Welcome back. I'm pleased everyone's had the break that they've needed. And we're going to crack on with our Teach Me element now. So what's going to happen now is that we've got some fantastic Teach Me's coming to speak to us for 10 minutes. Hi, Chris, you're first up in a moment. So we're going to be quite strict on the 10 minutes. And I am playing good cop, and Tom behind the scene is playing bad cop. And because we're not in our actual room, because obviously we're sponsored by TS Resources and we're normally at their headquarters, we can't wave our arms at you from the background doing this. So Tom has a button to take you off air. So if you run over by too much, he'll take you off air. He'll probably put a banner at the bottom as well. But thank you very much for coming and putting your name forward for all of our Teach Me speakers today. I know for some of you might be well versed at this, for some of you it's your first time. And what I love most about TM English Icons, and actually all the Teach Me icons, is this safe space for teachers to share their ideas and their passion about teaching, about pedagogy, about subject. So we're going to get cracking straight away. Over to you, Chris. I think your 10 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much. Right, let me just get my PowerPoint ready. Don't start the clock just yet.
So you're all good.
Thank you very much. Right, okay. So can people see my PowerPoint?
Oh no, I can't.
Let me just.
There might be a. Yes, now we can. It's coming up.
There it is. Brilliant. Okay, right. Okay, so I'm going to talk today basically very, very quickly about statistics and why I have a problem with them and why I hate them in particular, and focusing on question 5 for AQA exam, but obviously that transactional writing when students are writing about non-fiction. So what's my beef with statistics? Well, I don't think I've seen a student use a statistic in their piece of writing effectively to the point where I've gone, wow, I'm really, really moved and affected by that statistic. So a lot of the problem that we have is just their spurious statistics. And so I just thought a bit of a play is that it does take time to create a statistic that is of relevance and of use in a piece of non-fiction writing. And so here is just me just trying to play around with using statistics. Obviously it's a bit relevant because the only way I could make it interesting is related to myself at the moment. So the problem that we have with a lot of non-fiction writing is that there tends to be 3 modes of writing in the English classroom. Okay, we've got the creative writing, poetry, plays, novels, and short stories. Then we've got mode 2 is explanation, but also then we've got this argumentative writing. Now, if we look at mode 2, the explanation writing, that is the students, and the reason why I've put a crown on there, or a tiara, is the reason is that that is the most dominant form of writing across the whole of school. And so that is the one that leads all students with their writing. And so it's the default method. So when students try to write an argumentative piece, they fall back to this explanation writing. And of course, creative writing, it comes with its own joy. But the problem is we have in schools is that students tend to focus on explanation rather than developing an argument. And it's because we've created through schools and lots of different subjects, this waffle bot. And what they tend to do is they just waffle ideas and they're explaining ideas, but they're not convincing. So what I'm going to do is look at some strategies and how we can improve and attack the waffle bot and move towards more persuasive, argumentative writing, using elements of that creative, because we know students love writing creative writing, but non-fiction writing tends to be the one that gets stuck and we end up with waffle bots, which is just lots of explanation. So this is quite an interesting thing. This relates to arguments generally. Paul Graham came up with this idea of looking at how arguments are formed. And if you look at it, you can actually see this. It's almost like Twitter in a way, isn't it, really? You can see all arguments tend to start off at the bottom and then build up there. But what you can see is actually this is a way in how students write. And if you look at your students, you can see the way they are, that you tend to have those really weak students who are just calling out names and being horrible. Then you've got people that look at counter arguments, which I hate. And then we've got people that actually refute the point. So we have to look at what students do with the idea. So it's at the top of the pyramid, really, rather than the middle and the bottom. And so I think we spend too much time possibly on the middle and it's that bit at the top. Now, great thing is that we've got some things that people are using already at the moment, which I use with students. I use a bit of symbols, bit of actions, and sometimes in the exam I see them use this thing. So basically I say hand on heart pathos, that's your emotional, logical, emotional thinking. Logos, pointing to my newly shaven head, okay, which is the logical thinking. Ethos, which is why you in particular, what makes you a credible person. And then last one, which is one we've invented, which is cosmos, is how can you link your ideas to the wider universe and the wider things itself. So if we take that, how can we improve students' writing and move away from this explanation writing to being about argumentative writing? And that's because techniques focus on the glittery things. The glittery things, that's the problem. So it's like this Christmas tree. That tinsel doesn't make it better. So all statistics, quotations, interviews, examples, reasons, causes, counter-arguments, they are just tinsel. They don't address the actual issue, the problem. So what we need to do is employ different things and try adding drama. So we know students are very averse with creative writing in manipulation, turning points, stories, twisting, sleight of hands. That's the sort of thing that we need to do. So the problem we have with writing, and certainly with argumentative writing, is students obsess about hundreds of ideas. I tell students they only need one idea, but what they need to do is look at developing that idea. So develop it, take it, develop it, and develop it a bit further. And so what we should be doing is helping them see that actually it's not about explaining, but it's about doing something with the writing. So here are just quickly a few little ways in which we can kind of bring in a little bit of that narrative style of writing into writing an argumentative letter or a speech or even an essay. So yes, we can take the features of creative writing, we can use that in there, but we can do it a little bit further. Okay, and Kate, I've already seen, has been mentioned already, and this is a fantastic little bit of the book, some kids I taught and what they taught. Okay, it's absolutely brilliant. And I just found this paragraph and I just thought it's absolutely brilliant in terms of its structure and in terms of the ideas, but it makes it quite real. And what Kate kind of picked up on here, and I think is a really, really good thing, is actually putting narratives into non-fiction. And that's the thing that students don't do. They don't put storytelling. Storytelling is that automatic way for us to write. And it's such an easy way for us to get ideas and put them across. And we've seen it before. When we were teaching, advice leaflets many years ago, we could see that. We've got stories. Storytelling is a key thing. It's a key way that we engage with students and engage in ideas and readers. So pathos, I think we need to spend more time. It's ironic given the time and where things are at the moment, all right, that we need to work on the emotions and how people are feeling. But pathos for me is, I think, where we need to attack first. Students pick an idea and then they think about the idea and how it relates to emotions. So linking it to the text. So how can I link the audience to this idea? Whether it's smoking, homework, how can I link it? How can I position the reader so that they like or dislike, or they see that somebody is a victim or a villain? All of these things are what we do automatically in story writing. And how can we create that level of agency? So we can do that in writing. So we can have an image that really connects with people. We can have emotive language that can show who's the victim, who's the villain. And we can give students a chance that the reader, when they're reading the text, that they do have control. And it's not a passive thing, because the wafflebots make writing passive. And we need to make it a very emotional, active process where there's agency with the reader. So how can we do that? So we can put narratives in our writing. So we can put very, very simple, taking that idea, develop it further. We can make it a personal narrative. Chris has learned from an early age that hairstyle matters. So across our piece of writing, what we can do is we can build a narrative, pick a person, that person, give it life, create it. It could be you. You can create your own person here. The reason why I've put myself in this is because it just gives it immediacy. It gives that realness. It gives that sense of connection. I'm connected to that piece of writing. And so you can see across the text. Now, what are examiners looking for? They're looking for cohesion. They're looking for the whole text pulls together. What does storytelling do? Story links everything together. So we can have a personal narrative. So you could take somebody on a journey. And if we look at all those leaflets about the dogs, the poor injured animals, that is a narrative. What happened to Binky the dog? Okay, had a terrible life. It was awful. Now it's better. Okay, we saved it. We are the saviors. So having a personal narrative. But also, it doesn't have to be about people. It could be a physical narrative. If you want to moan about schools being such horrible places, then across the text, we can have a physical narrative. We describe the setting. We build it up. So the clock ticks. The invigilator shoe squeaks. Okay, please stop writing. The exam's over. And what we can do with that narrative across a piece of nonfiction, and yes, you're saying, why, homework is so bad, but you're building atmosphere, you're building tone, you're building mood, you're building an atmosphere, you're building pathos, which is what we need to look at. So logos is the ideas. Cosmos is where we link random stuff that we can kind of connect, and there's tiny little feeds and connections across the world. The question we've got to ask ourselves is, where is the narrative in this piece of nonfiction? I'm writing a speech, but really what I need to do is I need to tell a story. What is the story I'm telling? But more importantly, what is the emotional narrative? Because once you've got the pathos, once you've got that sorted out, you're making the reader feel something, then you can talk about the ethos. Why are you, as the writer, the student, the best person to talk about these feelings, these ideas? Okay, and then so what we can do is then build it up and build that writing. So we've got here, to cut hair, it takes skills. That's how my opening paragraph's going to be. And I'm going to link it into Chris has learned from an early age, that idea, that narrative. My second paragraph is about how traumatized it can make you. Chris's first haircut, simple affair, scissors, pudding bowl. And then we've got that simple mistake at the end. Chris didn't listen to advice and he shaved his hair off. So then we can build up. And this is what we need to do. We need to look at the structure. We need to look at the ideas, help students build up.
30 seconds, Chris.
Okay, thank you. So building up things, all right? So working through bit by bit, you can build it up and we can add our facts and we can add our rhetorical questions and build it along. So my time's up there. Okay, if we focus on emotions, then the writing fixes itself. We focus on techniques, then all we get is little bits that are floating on the surface that don't connect and don't link to the whole piece. So pathos, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I use Logos, Ethos and Pathos mainly in Key Stage 5, actually, more so than in GCSE. But I use it when we're looking at non-fiction writing, and I hadn't ever considered looking at it when we look across to fiction writing. So thank you very much as well. Okay, so thank you, Chris. Next up is Heidi. So we're going to switch over. Thank you very much, Heidi, for coming today. Just to mention to everyone as well, if you're using the chat and Twitter, do connect with our speakers today. Do ask questions. We will throw them up onto the screen. Speakers can choose to answer them if they have an opportunity to, or equally, I'm sure they'll be able to get back to you in our comments and our Twitters as well. In our Twitters, gosh, I'm neologizing new words today. You know what I mean. Thank you very much. Heidi, over to you.
Hi, this is my first time, so bear with me. I'm also on my husband's computer because I had a bit of an IT issue this morning. Just going to hopefully, oh, it's only going to let me share screen. Share screen.
Technology works when you want it to, under pressure.
No.
Classroom. The day Ofsted comes is the day that all the PowerPoints all go down, of course, isn't it?
Sorry, I'm finding the right thing here.
Don't worry, it's no rush.
Got it. Hopefully. Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Problem with the Bard. We're all up and running. Thank you so much, Heidi.
Oh, it's gone.
It's
Sorry,
gone.
I'm going mad.
Go, don't worry. What you've missed, everyone, here is Tom and I spending about 2 hours doing this ourselves last night, trying to figure out how it's always going to work. So we're only 2 hours a page ahead of you all. So
right. Can people see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Brilliant
Excellent.
stuff.
Okay, this is me. I teach at Cultural Grammar School, so I've got selective boys' school, but still have lots of issues with engagement with Shakespeare historically. And I love Shakespeare. People have seen me rant about Macbeth possibly before, but I didn't when I was at school myself, and lots of people don't. And it's such a shame because it's the first place we tend to experience it. So I'm just going to share some thoughts I'm starting to have around teaching Shakespeare, and hopefully I'm going to sort of develop them over time. So one thing that I love is Peter Hall talking about his first experience of Shakespeare, and it is active and joining in and engaging and throwing it all around, and it's fantastic. Shakespeare, he was thrilling and blood-soaked and full of witches. To prepare for this, I spoke to some of my online friends, and the response was not so good. Basically, a whole load of, oh, our teacher made us read around the class. It was really dull. I didn't get it. It was too hard. Didn't understand it. We all just read around. It wasn't interesting, which made me sad because it's great. What do I think are the reasons behind this? I have, well, three theories. Exceptionalism, this marketisation of the genius of Shakespeare, the genre that we're teaching. I think a lot of people, hopefully, not many people I know, but it seems to be that a lot of people are teaching it as the wrong genre, and also reading round in a class, but with no training on how to sight read verse, which just makes for a rather odd experience for everyone. So about exceptionalism. So since the publication of the first folio in 1623, there's been this huge explosion, this idea that Shakespeare is a total genius and the only one. Loads of people responsible for it, not just the first folio chaps. Johnson throws his oar in, Milton even does. And by the time we hit the Victorian era, we hear from Matthew Arnold that he's part of the best that has been thought and said. And this whole idea that you should study Shakespeare because it's good for you takes hold, that you will be somehow become a moral and better person just through the study of Shakespeare. The introduction of the national curriculum then in 1989 really also cemented Shakespeare's exceptional position because he was the only compulsory author. We have to teach 19th century, but it could be a variety of authors. You have to teach Shakespeare. And this carries through even into our current times, where within the reduced content for the 22 exams, when they were going to happen, they operated from the starting point on the reduction that Shakespeare must remain compulsory, even though plenty of schools, upwards of half, sorry, I've got sort of cat issues here, hadn't yet taught Shakespeare. In fact, my own school had still to teach Shakespeare. We leave it to last. And yet, so this Shakespeare's centrality and exceptionalism was going to lead potentially to some students being disadvantaged. So how can we solve this issue? One way is to point out that Shakespeare was one among many. He wasn't the only successful playwright of the early modern era. How can we do that? Extracts, ideally, and whole text if time allowed, but I'm well aware that time doesn't often allow. So mention these the other people working at the time. Point out he wasn't a solitary genius. He was a member of an acting company that all inputted and often collaborated with others. I'm often to be found ranting to my year 11s about the horrid Middleton additions to Macbeth, for example. Talk about, honestly, why we study Shakespeare. I mean, part of it is because we are told to, but it's not because we'll be better people. It's because he was highly talented and he was a successful playwright, hugely financially successful. He was good. It is good. But also, what we are left with in the folio, not all of them are complete works. They're cobbled together from sort of Q scripts and similar. They're work in progress. The plays themselves were adapted over time, so the textual history of the texts in themselves that you teach are relevant. I was at university before I realised there was more than one copy of King Lear, for example, more than one version. These things can really help make it seem that Shakespeare is less unapproachable and unattainable. He's somebody who didn't just appear fully formed. And it comes down to it. Shakespeare wrote plays predominantly, excluding those times when the theatres were shut and his sonnets. He wrote plays predominantly in blank verse. And yet the number of students who continually write about in the book in exams really, really irritates me. And it shows that genre is an issue, particularly when, you know, it's included in the mark scheme, but just for understanding. And Shakespeare was actually aware of this issue of how poorly delivered verse affects meaning. As you can see on the slide to the other side, I've got the lovely, excuse me, cat, prologue from the Pyramus and Thisbe section, and it's structured to be read correctly, but with the pauses in the wrong place gives us this situation whereby it becomes nonsense. That is how so many students hear Shakespeare in the classroom. They just hear it wrong. We need to get engaged with the verse properly. And this is where I go all evangelical, stage, not page. Plays are exciting, vital, living things, but English lessons tend to be quite page bound for a variety of reasons, particularly at the minute. And it disrupts our experience of genre, and it can make it feel to students very, very similar to a novel. And I think that's where the in the book, and obviously they study it literally in a book. How do we solve this? I'm coming back to this idea of pre-teaching here that Stuart mentioned, and this often also applies to difficult vocabulary as well. But pre-teach how to read verse, and do that regularly, because it's so important, not just for looking at Shakespeare, but also for looking at poetry. I know I need to work on this myself. The number of students who when they read in class, just stop at the end of the line. No, don't read to the punctuation. This really disrupts their experience of meaning. And I think that's half the battle in that, oh, it's too hard. Well, it is. You've read it wrong. It's not their fault they've read it wrong, but it's a real barrier to accessing meaning. Contextualize Shakespeare's reasons for writing in verse. What is the purpose of the blank verse? Why it is there, and how did it work at the time? Cue scripts are a really fascinating thing to work with, to explain why with piracy of text that they might do this, but also how the text is structured to produce the clues to actors whilst they only had the 3 words before each line. Producing cue scripts is really useful. Point out the clever bits, and there are so many. Romeo and Juliet sonnets, when they meet and they're doing their whole flirty bit in sonnets, it's fantastic. The soliloquy clues are hugely amazing in Macbeth. Did some fantastic work with the Globe Theatre, where you track the iambic pentameter in Is This a Dagger I See Before Me? And you can track his mental state almost as like an ECG type affair. And the rhythms of the language communicate that to the actor. It's so clever. The fact that the Hecate scene, which is a bit rubbish, let's be honest, it's there for dramatic reasons. You've got a banquet on stage. When we move indoors to the indoor theatre, whack in a Hecate scene, you can move your set off. It's why I kept it when I direct it. Dramatic structure is important. It also gives some of those actors that have been in a very emotional scene 5 minutes to catch their breath. Dramatic plays are structured in a specific way for a specific reason. When you can, act it. When we get the opportunities to do these things, act it. And I really, really cannot recommend, I know it's not possible for everybody, directing plays you're going to teach. You get so much insight if you get a chance to do that, or just direct a scene. Do seek support from both the Royal Shakespeare Company and Shakespeare's Globe. They are fantastic with that. The resources are fabulous. Their training sessions are great. I cannot recommend them enough. Reading around the class. I seem to have lost, did I double a slide there? I seem to have lost a slide. Reading around the class. People do it. I know teachers who do it. I hate it. I absolutely despise reading around the class, and don't do it, because sight reading is hard. It's a reason that you get tested on it in your music exams. It's difficult, and it is a skill loads of people don't have. So if you're going to get students to read out in class, give out parts in advance and ask them to prepare if you can rely upon them to do so.
30 seconds, Heidi.
Sorry?
30 seconds, Heidi.
Okay. Model appropriate reading of the soliloquies yourself. Give them rehearsal time. Use recordings. Do those things instead of reading round. But most disappointingly, when I was researching this, I came across teachers going, I don't do that drama nonsense. Well, I'm sorry, you're teaching Shakespeare. You are teaching drama. It's unavoidable and it's not nonsense. Practical approaches work is deeply rooted in the text. It is brilliant for exam preparation because it's closely focused on the text and it makes them enjoy it. It brings up that energy. If we think back to earlier, why wouldn't you do it? And to quote an RSC report on Shakespeare education, there is no substitute for doing rather than reading Shakespeare. And I've gone all ranty, so sorry. And that's my last bit.
Perfect. Thank you so much. No problem with ranting about teaching Shakespeare. Absolutely. We all do it. So thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you very much. Brilliant.
Thank you.
So, next up, we have Yamina Bibi. And you spoke for our last event, Yamina, and I loved you then. So I'm so pleased to have you back. So 10 minutes on the clock. It's all yours.
Oh, goodness. Right. Let's see if I can get this sharing up, shall I? Hi, everyone.
Don't worry. I don't start the clock until you get the slides up.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Teaching remotely for nearly a year would change things, wouldn't you? Can I start?
Yes, please do.
Hi everyone, I'm Yamina Bibi. I'm an assistant head teacher at Forest Gate Community School in East London. I did speak at the last one. I'm not going to lie, it was my first time up north. So we drove all the way up north because we were so excited to go to Teach Me English Icons. And I'm just even more excited to be here today. So thank you so much for having me again. I can't help it. So what I'm going to be talking about mastering MCQs in English. And I'm going to put it out there. I use the word mastering only because I like alliteration in my titles and not because I'm a master. I'm not. It's something that I'm working on, and I think we are all working on when it comes to remote learning, but also something we've been working on for a while now. You can follow me at Miss YBB or tweet me there. So why MCQs? What do we know about retrieval practice? In order to understand the importance and the effectiveness of MCQs, we need to be able to understand and know more about retrieval practice. So in their book, Making It Stick, Peter C. Brown and the other authors talk about practice at the importance of it. So practice at retrieving new knowledge or skill from memory is a potent tool for learning and durable retention. Effortful retrieval makes for stronger learning and retention. When the mind had to work, learning sticks better, they argue. And after an initial test, delaying subsequent retrieval practice is more potent for reinforcing retention than immediately practicing afterwards, because they argue that delayed retrieval requires more effort. So how do multiple choice questions fit into that, and why is that important? Well, I became obsessed, and I like to use the words obsessed all the time. I like superlatives, you see, but I became obsessed with multiple choice questions a couple of years ago, actually, when I read Daisy Christodoulou's book, Making Good Progress, The Future of Assessment for Learning. And in it, she argues that the main inference that is needed from formative assessments is how we should proceed next. That the assessment still needs to be something that's reliable, because that reliability is a prerequisite for validity. If it's not a reliable multiple choice question or reliable formative assessment, then how do we know it's going to be valid in helping us check for understanding? And that when we're developing assessment for formative purposes, we need to break those skills down and tasks down, so that the same task that would feature maybe in a summative assessment, we need to break those skills down, she argues, so that they give us valid feedback on how our pupils are progressing towards that final goal. And I found that really interesting as an English teacher who loves writing essays and who loves encouraging students to write essays, about what that would mean for us in the English classroom. And, we know that Dylan Williams said, he preferred to call it responsive teaching now rather than formative assessment. And that's what we're talking about with multiple choice questions. That's exactly what they are. They are responsive teaching strategies. So why multiple choice questions? Well, Christodoulou argues that one of the advantages of multiple choice questions is that they're very precise and specific, and that's why they're able to target those misconceptions very effectively. That they are easy to analyze, and that in Google Forms, which I'm sure lots of our teachers have been doing anyway, you can add those explanations to each answer so that you can explain directly to students why the answer is either right or wrong. And therefore, they make it very easy to give meaningful feedback. Why multiple choice questions? Well, I found that they're quite, high challenge, but they're low threat. They provide the challenge for students depending on the questions that are created, but they're not, high stakes accountability. We can use them throughout the lesson. I think retrieval practice has become known for just starter activities. Well, actually, what Dylan Williams and Daisy Christodoulou will argue is that we can use them throughout the lesson for different reasons. And that's why they're effective hinge questions. So if we want to identify whether students have really understood the concept that we've just taught them, then we have a multiple choice question in the middle of that lesson or in that bit of the learning to check, and that can be a multiple choice question to check whether students have really got it or whether we need to go back and reteach that. They're self-marked. I love it so much. It's a workload win. Self-marked quizzes via Google Forms. There are other types of forms. It's just that I don't know how to use any other types of forms. They're reusable. And what I love about Google Forms, and I'm sure the other forms might do this, you can import questions from other forms, quizzes that you've created. So say if you created a quiz on just Act 1 of Macbeth, and you've been doing that for each act, then at the end of the term, what I might do, or in the middle of the term or the unit of work, I might create a new quiz, but it's just literally importing those questions from all the other forms that I've created before. So again, they're a workload win. And something that we've been doing at Forest Gate Community School, and I'll talk a little bit more about this if I've got time, is we've been using them as homework. And I think lots of us have been doing the same thing to close those knowledge gaps and also as a workload win. And what I also love about self-marked quizzes on Google Form is that you can add collaborators. So you're not just working on it on your own as a teacher, but everyone can collaborate on those specific quizzes and creating those. So what are the key principles for designing MCQs? So in Stuart Kimes' Research Ed Loom presentation, he talks about the guidelines for using MCQs in distance learning, but I actually think they apply when we come back to school anyway. So the question, it should be a question, and it's called the STEM, and the STEM identifies the key knowledge being tested, and it should be a meaningful question. Be precise and focus on one small aspect of a topic, he argues. Avoid that complex vocabulary in the STEM question, because you're not testing whether they've understood the question. It's about testing the key content and the knowledge. It should not be negatively phrased. The key is your correct answer. But the two others, Kime argues, are the distractors. And he says that having a choice of 3 is probably best, although Christodoulou argues that you can increase that if you want to increase the challenge, because you want it to be challenging, but you also want it to be quite fun. And this is what I'm going to be very honest, is something that we've been working on as a department. Those alternatives should be similar in content, mutually exclusive, and not overlap. And I find that difficult because when you know the answer to something, it's really hard to come up with the other stuff, like the other misconceptions. And really, you've got to really know your stuff and really think about those misconceptions. So alternatives should be similar in content, mutually exclusive, and not overlap. And that is a really challenging thing that I'm finding at the moment. And that each incorrect answer should really point you to a misconception that you can address. So before I get on to how we've implemented it, one of the things that we've done at Forest Gate is mapping those MCQs out strategically term by term. So we know exactly what we're going to be testing according to our midterm plans, our MTPs and our LTPs. And you can see our head of Key Stage 3, Shahida Sharmin, and our head of Key Stage 4, Annie Bergin, along with our amazing English teachers at school, have been working really hard to design these MCQs and quality assure those. And you can see that it's mapped out, and we've mapped them out accordingly. So everybody's invested in those multiple choice questions, and we have one person in charge of a year group, but they're shared out and teachers can support and adapt them for their own classes. And then what we've also got is you can see what's being tested at each point as well. And we've mapped those out in advance, so it's very, very clear. And those have been done strategically to support our team so they know what's coming next. And they're sometimes also interleaved, so we're not just testing that topic or for that term, but also what we've taught previously to recall prior knowledge and check their understanding as well. So how have we gone about implementing those principles? So really thinking about the key, and the STEM being the question, what is a trochaic tetrameter? What I would have done before is I've taught that to the students before. So this particular slide that you see is actually a slide that I've used before to teach the students about the different types of meter that Shakespeare uses in Macbeth, for example. And then what I would do is then use a multiple choice question or hinge question in order to check whether they've actually got the differences, they've understood the differences. And one of the things that I love about the Google quizzes is they very quickly tell you the frequently missed questions, or they tell you how many students have answered accordingly. And hopefully what I should then be able to do, if my distractors are correct, is be able to identify what the misconception is. So if students choose this answer, it leads me to understand they maybe thought that they've misinterpreted trochaic tetrameter, they've misunderstood it to be iambic pentameter, and that's really been quite challenging. It's really challenging. And then what we would then do is, based on that misconception, reteach it. So teach, test, reteach if you need to, and then retest if you need to as well. And that can be done as a memory starter, but it can also be done as hinge questions as well, or as part of homework. And then you can see more recently, Shahida Shamin, our head of Key Stage 3, has done such amazing work around creating and implementing these principles as part of our assessment. So instead of having an essay question, really breaking it down. So you can see that what Shahida's done, and again, we're really working on developing these further, is broken down the kind of assessment criteria. So usually our assessment would be, here's a question, here's an extract, you know, how does Shakespeare do this? Or how does Shakespeare use language in order to portray? Whereas what Shahida's done and what the team have done is created multiple choice questions that still allow us to identify what misconceptions students might have, and also really break down those key skills that help us work towards that end goal, like Daisy Christodoulou suggests. So what are the next steps? I'm just checking for time. Don't know how, 1 minute, this is perfect. What are the next steps for us then? So we want to map out the key content that we want to test for the rest of the term. Obviously, students are coming back on the 8th of March, who I'm not going to lie, I'm really excited to see the kids. But there's also a lot of work to be done. So really thinking about what we're going to be testing students on, both through homework, but also in-class hinge questions, creating those MCQs in advance that enable teachers and leaders to check for understanding, identify the misconceptions and areas that we need to address. And we're not talking about a catch-up curriculum, we're talking about identifying, mapping out, identifying and supporting our students with kind of ensuring that they've understood the key concepts and the key skills, and then continuing to quality assure them. What's one of the key processes that once our teachers or our leaders of that year group have created their multiple choice questions, we quality assure them, and we provide that training for all teachers to continue being able to do that, and then streamline all multiple choice questions. This is from Tamina, actually. Tamina is our head teacher at Forestgate, and she suggested it to me yesterday in an email, which I thought I'd steal because it's such a brilliant idea. Streamline all MCQs to one form so that all teachers for that week can use the same MCQ. And then actually, if we map it out for the whole term, it's the same MCQ that's used, and all students will have to do is there'll be a drop-down menu.
20 seconds,
This will enable teachers and leaders to identify what the misconceptions are per class. So it allows me as the assistant head of English to be able to identify what the gaps are for each class and support through training, department meetings, and subject-specific CPD, as well as kind of adapting multiple choice questions and the MPPs as well. Here is some reading and some watching for you to do. But yeah, I hope that's been useful. And yeah, tweet me if you have any questions. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mina. As always, loads of information in a very short space of time, but I'm sure people will definitely be in touch.
I feel really harsh doing this, by the way, really harsh, but I feel like the utter bad cop, but I'm going to carry on.
Well, as English teachers, we love to talk, and as English teachers, we've got a plethora of words to use. So
thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Brilliant. So next up, we have Sarah Mullin.
Hello.
Three of you waiting in the backstage, so I'm very pleased to see you. Thank you very much for coming. I love your books, and I will say that there was a story in one of them which was about a teacher and a battered sausage, and when I read it I laughed very hard and then realised and found out it was my teacher neighbour in the classroom next door who submitted it to you, so gotta love it. You've got 10 minutes on the clock, it's all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen.
Hopefully it's going to work. A little bit of a lag sometimes.
Is that okay?
No, we can't see your screen.
1 second, sorry.
That's okay.
Probably okay. Time, just while Sarah's getting ready, to remind you all of the Sarah, we can see it now. We're all good.
Oh, great.
Just to remind everybody of the selfie competition. If you want to tweet your selfie, you can tag in TM English Icons. We've got about £30 worth of Amazon vouchers to give away, plus a load of books. So if you want to do that, get involved. The hashtag TMEnglishIcons. Also, thanks to our sponsors. You'll see them rolling across the bottom during these presentations, which have been absolutely amazing so far. I'm going to hand over to Lizzie and Sarah now.
Brilliant. We can see you, Sarah. So your 10 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Sarah Mullin. I'm a Deputy Head and former Head of English. And this morning, I'm going to be talking to you about a topic which is very close to my heart and something that Stuart touched on earlier on, and that's promoting a love for learning in English by exploring critical literary theories. Now, as an early career teacher, I was very passionate about encouraging my students to be able to engage with text on a deep analytical level, as they drew inferences from specific moments in the text in order to justify their interpretations of key themes and ideas. But I was conscious that I didn't want to simply spoon-feed my own interpretations of the text that we were studying. I was tending to see essays which offered very similar responses to the exploration of language, themes, and ideas. And guided by the assessment objectives, I wanted to encourage my learners to produce original perceptive accounts, which were communicated in a succinct, sophisticated, and coherent writing style. And so I introduced the explicit teaching of critical literary theories. Now, I don't know about you, but I first encountered literary theory myself in my first year of university. As I navigated my way through a post-colonial critique of Othello, it dawned on me that previously I'd probably read a range of texts from perspectives applicable to some of these theories, but I wasn't equipped with the knowledge or the language to be able to articulate my ideas fully. Teaching critical theory at secondary school level enables us to provide frameworks with which children can view the world around them in addition to the text that they're exploring. By carefully and systematically introducing our children and young people to a plethora of critical theories, we can help them to appreciate that there are actually many ways in which a text can be read and enjoyed. Using literary theory in the classroom allows us to explore text beyond, far beyond the level of language, plot, character, theme, and setting. As English teachers, we can provide those firm foundations from which students can build independent explorations of the text that they read, so they can make informed, well-reasoned judgments in their oral and written responses. And it's wonderful, when you have those wow moments in the classroom where children who have a secure understanding of literary theories are able to confidently articulate and debate their ideas in a meaningful way, leading to a richer understanding of and appreciation for literature. So how do we effectively teach our students to respect and appreciate alternative and even conflicting viewpoints when navigating a text? I'd like to suggest that we start laying those foundations early in Key Stage 3. I mean, of course, we don't expect 11-year-olds to become literary critics. However, if they have a general understanding of the theory, in addition to being able to confidently use some key terminology to illustrate their ideas, we are providing children with the tools to engage with text at a deeper level. So let me give you an example. It's a joy to teach A Midsummer Night's Dream in the summer term of Year 7 when the sun is shining and you can take the children outside to perform the text in the way that Shakespeare intended. There is also a perfect opportunity here for children to consider the play through the lens of feminist literary criticism. Whilst in many respects we want children to enjoy the text as a whimsical, mystical romance, we can also help our children to explore the gender roles in Elizabethan society, in particular the prejudiced views towards women. In the opening act, Hermia makes it abundantly clear that she's not at all interested in the relentless love pursuits of Demetrius. Yet, with her father in the support of the union, Hermia as a woman has little choice in the matter. She must marry her chosen future husband and bear children, or face death. Now, this subject matter allows us to introduce children to the concept of patriarchy. And by laying those foundations in Year 7, we have the ability to ignite a natural curiosity as children are now able to discover additional examples of female oppression in the play themselves, as well as in further texts that they're reading. These theories, in conjunction with the teaching of specialist language, will of course be developed each time a text is studied, so that the foundation blocks of knowledge can be built on in preparation for applying feminist theory to characters such as Portia in The Merchant of Venice or Juliet Capulet, for example, at GCSE. Now, we can provide further opportunities for students to hone their skills when they encounter the courageous protagonists in Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses, so that by the time they get to A-level, they can independently and confidently carry out an exploration of female desire and sisterhood in Rossetti's Goblin Market. Another example might include introducing students in Key Stage 3 to Marxist theory as part of a whole class reading of The Fable Animal Farm, so that learners can build secure foundations and acquire the terminology which will allow them to explore a Marxist criticism of Wilfred Owen's war poetry at GCSE before conducting an in-depth Marxist reading of The Great Gatsby at Key Stage 5. With a substantial amount of GCSE examination material to cover, in a highly pressurised environment, preparing children to examine literature from different critical perspectives using this progression model can really pay dividends in terms of student engagement and assessment outcomes in Year 11. We can introduce the initial concepts of literary theory by helping children to realise that bias and unconscious bias exists inside all of us. In order to critically analyse a text, we really have to dig deep inside ourselves and think, what assumptions do we have about the text that we're studying? We can apply a structuralist reading of fairy tales by exploring the much-loved classic Cinderella. We can use popular song lyrics or rap lyrics as a stimulus to uncover layers of meaning within the text. What are the literal meanings? How could we approach and study these meanings from a Marxist perspective, for example? We can teach theory alongside reading strategies, which will help frame new criticism as a metacognition strategy students can then use to construct meaning. We can host book clubs for able, gifted and talented learners where we carry out a deconstructive reading of Frankenstein, a skill which we hope they will then be able to independently apply as they read their GCSE set text. We can invite our children to creatively reconstruct a particular narrative through the eyes of a female character. We can organise extracurricular events with groups from other schools where students are encouraged to explore psychoanalytical readings of Wuthering Heights, for example. Teaching critical theory is a great way to nurture a student's natural curiosity, promoting that thirst for knowledge. As students explore text from multiple perspectives, they will also be appreciating the relevance of the text that they are studying. And that's really, really important in terms of engagement. The study of language choices in Macbeth can lead to incredibly insightful discussions about race. The characters in Great Expectations can be explored using psychoanalytical theory, for example. And even as early as primary school age, children could be introduced to the notion that people may be perceived in certain ways because of their gender and other factors as well. Teaching critical theory allows our children to develop skills in empathy, which may help them to build stronger relationships with their peers and other adults, positioning them well for life after school, in addition to their learning. And it is said that the highest form of knowledge is empathy. I'd like to leave you this morning with my favourite quotation of all time, and it's those poignant words of Harper Lee, which I've tweeted a few times now on social media. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside his skin and walk around in it. Teaching our children critical theories enables our children to do just that. And the possibilities for teaching critical theory really are endless and very exciting. So let's see what our children and young people can do as we promote a thirst for knowledge and a love for literature in our schools. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. Brilliant stuff. Love a bit of critical theory. So I will definitely be using that in my classroom. So thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Fab. Next up, we have Hannah. Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
If you want to grab up your presentation in the background. Hannah's here to talk to us about explicit vocabulary instruction, which I think is going to be really interesting and probably linked to some of the stuff that Stuart was talking about earlier, I would imagine as well. A lot of those influences are probably very much what you're going to talk about today, I'd imagine. But I'm really looking forward to what you've got to share. So we've got your screen, we've got a little bit of insight going on. We're seeing kind of ourselves within ourselves. So we're halfway what we need. Leonardo DiCaprio, at your heart out.
Oh gosh, I think I've got it. Okay, hopefully this works. Perfect. Can you see that?
It's just coming up now. Yes, we can. All yours, Hannah.
Is that better if it's bigger?
Yes, it is, please.
Brilliant. Okay, no problem. So today I'm going to talk about the importance of explicit vocabulary instruction. A bit of information about me. I work in a school in North Leeds, but I've previously worked in a school where 80% of pupils wear EAL. Vocabulary instruction is so important because pupils with a restrictive vocabulary tend to be poor readers as adults, are more likely to be unemployed, more likely to suffer from mental health issues. But there's also a moral imperative to teaching vocabulary. The limits of your language are the limits of your world. If we don't teach our pupils vocabulary explicitly, how will they understand things like implied racism or become active citizens in the world around them? I'm going to start off by being a little bit brave and talking to you about some strategies I've previously used that haven't been effective before going on to some really effective strategies that I've used recently. A mistake I made quite early on in my career is kind of death by dictionary. I used to have dictionaries in every single table, and I would hope that dictionaries would be my cure to this vocabulary deficit. Now, the problem with over-relying on dictionaries is the definitions are often inaccessible. Dictionaries were often not designed with poor readers in mind. As well as this, 40% of the words in the English language are polysemous, meaning they've got more than one meaning. So it's impossible for some of our students to select the right definition or the right word for the context. As well as this, another mistake I've made previously is I asked students to work out the meaning of the word through the context of the sentence. Isabel Becquerel talks in detail about the issues with doing this. And the issues stem around the fact that there are 4 different contexts of sentences. You've got a misdirected context. This is when the context of the sentence can give your pupils an incorrect definition or meaning. So, for example, the old house was beautiful, homely, and haunted. Beautiful and homely have positive connotations. So pupils may assume from that that haunted has a positive meaning. So this is an example of a misdirected context. You also have non-directed context. So this is when the phrase gives no real inclination of what decrepit might mean. So the house was decrepit. The house was gives the students no real understanding or grasp of what that word may mean. You have general contexts where students can make a sort of guess, broken windows, peeling paintwork. They can kind of guess that decrepit has a negative connotation. And then you have your huzzah, the perfect context, where the surrounding description gives a precise meaning. A building is often described as decrepit when it looks old and unloved. So we can't allow our students to just work out the meanings of words passively through the context of the sentences, because the majority of the context of the sentence won't give the student any real clue about what that word means. Another pitfall I fell into was asking students to copy down words really passively. Now, there's a real issue with this because it creates winners and losers. And Alex Quigley talks about this idea that vocabulary at the moment is often caught, not taught. It's really important that we explicitly teach these words. 10% of 7 to 11-year-olds are poor comprehenders. So it's really important that we explicitly teach these words and explicitly teach strategies to students so that they can help them work out these words in the future. I know there's a lot of stress on teachers, especially at the moment, to get students ready for exams, and sometimes vocabulary is seen as an extra thing, something that teachers don't have time to do. And I really come back to what Mary Myatt says here, which I think is amazing. It is our job and our responsibility as English teachers to make all pupils aware of the jewels contained within our curriculum. Yes, Shakespeare contains challenging language, but that doesn't mean we dumb it down or we give them student-friendly versions. No, we give them the strategies and we explicitly teach the vocabulary that Shakespeare uses so that all pupils can experience that joy of Shakespeare and understand things like, the universal human condition that Shakespeare explores. So I'm going to talk you through now some strategies I've used myself in the classroom. And I used Alex Quigley's 4-step process. Step 1 is select, step 2 explain, 3 explore, 4 consolidate. So it looked a bit like this. I started off by deciding which vocabulary I was going to prioritise. So this was this half term whilst teaching Macbeth to Year 10. And I did this through writing academic essays myself about the characters, but also reading Neil Bauman's amazing book, The Art of Drama, and Stuart and Amy's Ready to Teach Macbeth. If you haven't got these books, I would really, really recommend them. So I read their texts and I highlighted the ambitious vocabulary that they had used that really helped their meaning. And then I created a list. After reading Catherine Mortimer's brilliant book, Disciplinary Literacy, I decided I wanted to create a vocabulary booklet which contained all of those words. Now, there's an example of that on my slide here. I've got a student-friendly definition, I've got the etymology, and I've got a key image to help them remember what that word means. And I gave students this Bible, this bank of these words, before we started the unit. Every Monday, I introduce students to their new set of words. It's really important that you don't introduce them in all one foul swoop. You need to break it down so it's not a cognitively overwhelming task. So I did the Stave 1 words in week 1, Stave 2 week 2, Stave 3 week 3, Stave 4 week 4, Stave 5 week 5, scene 5, and then Act 5. And then in the end, I recalled all those previous words we'd looked at. So on the Monday, I introduced students to their set of words for that week. We practice saying those words using I say, you say. If students do not know how to say the word, that word will never be stored in their long-term memory. And I would be honest with students. This is a really good way of persuading Year 11 students to chant with you. Say if you can't say the words, you'll never be able to remember them. Empower the students with that pedagogical knowledge, that pedagogical understanding. I then gave students a student-friendly definition, and I gave that word in different contexts. It's really important you don't just give the noun form of that word. In an essay written by Robinson, she talks about a science classroom where students were taught vibration, and they were taught the noun form of that word. But when the teacher acted out vibrating, students couldn't answer her questions. And it's not because they didn't have their subject knowledge. It's because they didn't have the knowledge of how to change the noun form into the verb form. So make sure you show them explicitly examples of that word in the context of different sentences. Students then dual coded these new words. They drew an image to help them remember them and store them in their long-term memory. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we then explored the meanings of those words. We looked at the etymology and the morphology. This is a really nice thing to do, particularly if you've got Portuguese students, because they'll recognise a lot of those Latinate words. I also gave students a list of synonyms and antonyms because this really helps deepen their knowledge of these words through connecting and categorising. So I gave them a list of synonyms and a list of antonyms, and we talked about the slight variation in some of those meanings. Then they completed a word explorer sheet. They used it, debated it, transformed it, linked it to the text, and as well as that, they linked it to employability skills. With the Gatsby benchmarks that have recently been published, it's really important that we're making these employability links the whole time. As well as this, I adapted Jenny's intensity scale. So Jenny uses this scale to map the different intensities of words as synonyms of the same word, but I adapted it to help map the progression in the development of a character. So at the beginning, Macbeth starts off as strategic, whereas at the end, he becomes bloodthirsty. So they can use that and the vocabulary to map how that character changes and progresses. You could also do this for other characters, like Lady Macbeth. What's really important is that you foster academic talk in the classroom. I really liked about what Stuart said earlier about writing floating on a sea of talk. I think that's completely correct. I love that. We have to empower our students and give them an opportunity to use these words in talk. Now, lots of students will struggle with this. So ABC feedback is a really good way to support this. You can ask them to agree with, build upon, or challenge. You can make this slightly more accessible by using sentence stems as well, so that you might ask your low ability students whether they agree, your middle ability students to build upon, and then your challenge students, okay, can you come up with an alternative argument? How can we see this from play devil's advocate? Can you see this from an alternative perspective? And then we looked at high grade models. If students don't see the words within the different contexts, and they won't be able to replicate that work themselves. So this is an example of a model I used. As you can see, it has heinous, merciless, serenity, damnation, traitorous, eternal salvation. I've got students in my year 10 class who are aiming for a grade 4, but they still deserve to see these academic words. They still deserve to have access to the jewels contained within our curriculum. So I gave them this model paragraph and we annotated it with the meanings of what these words meant. And also we wrote our own sentences with those words in. Spend time on the model paragraph, giving students a deep knowledge of those words. And then we consolidated. We did tests on a Monday and a Friday. We looked at the spelling and the meaning of those words. On Fridays, they then metacognitively reflected on the success of their test. And this is an example of some student work that was produced.
20 seconds, Hannah, I'm afraid.
I've got it. As you can see, this student is using inhumane, domineering, unearthly, synonymous, ominous, thus. This is a student who's targeted a grade 4, but with vocabulary, they feel empowered. And finally, I want to end on this note. Vision without execution is hallucination. It is not enough for us to say today that explicit vocabulary is important. We have to immediately, from Monday, start putting these strategies into practice. Otherwise, we're never going to empower our students and close that vocabulary gap. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah. It was really, really interesting. Fab. Next up, we have Mary Hind-Portley. Again, another returner. So you obviously spoke in Sheffield for us. So welcome back. I was. You enjoyed your talk last time, so great to have you back this time. Is your PowerPoint all working for you, Mary?
It is. I'm just going to share screen.
Okay, let's check it's working. Fab.
There we go.
I can see it. So the clock starts now for you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about rhetoric today. I'm not going to go into the absolute fine details of rhetoric. I'm going to take it from the perspective of curriculum planning. Just to start with, what is rhetoric? So Aristotle says, let rhetoric be the capacity to discover the possible means of persuasion concerning any subject. And then Quintilian, who came later, says, knowing how to speak well. I truly believe that rhetoric is fundamental part of our curriculum, that if we don't teach rhetoric, then we are doing our students a disservice, because rhetoric rules the world. So I've tried to break it down into 4 areas that, first of all, I said it's all around us. So how do we give our students access to a really robust curriculum that includes rhetoric embedded explicitly and implicitly in what we do? So one of the things that I was thinking about was that lots of the students that we work with come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And what we want to make sure is that they can take part in our democracy. Access to an understanding of rhetoric is democracy in action. Students need to be empowered. Our students need a voice in the world. If they don't have a voice, they can't take part. If they don't have a voice and they don't understand the rhetoric around them, they are more likely to follow the fake news and believe that that is true. We want our students to question what they read and what they hear. We know as teachers how much rhetoric has been used to obfuscate and confuse around what we're doing at the moment and what we will be doing when we turn to live classrooms in our actual buildings. I want students to be able to understand what they're being told, how they're being told it, and why they're being told that, and what they can then present as counter arguments. So we also need to think about, where did rhetoric originate? So we need to go right back to Aristotle and to Plato in order to build this foundation into our curriculum. We need to think about the art of judice. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, where rhetoric plays a vital role in generating partiality or bias. So Aristotle understood the power of the argument. He understood that an argument could be fluent, well structured, but actually be empty. that in fact rhetoric can teach us how to put together an apparently strong argument which actually is empty in terms of its content. And we don't want our students to do that, but what we do want them to do is we do want them to see where empty rhetoric is being used around them. So I've put these 4 words together to try to underpin what I want to do with rhetoric in the curriculum in our department. So first of all, it's thinking about access. What do we want students to be able to do, to know and to understand? What concepts do we need them to be able to access? The next part of what I want to talk about is the ambition. What do we want for our students? And when I first started teaching, deforest or aforest or its variants was widespread. Still come across it today. And whilst it can be a useful mnemonic for students, I really want us to think about, is that what we want for our students? Does it give them a rich conceptualized understanding of rhetoric, or does it dumb down and disadvantage our disadvantaged students? I don't like deforest. I don't want it used in the teams that I work in, because I feel it's restrictive and it trivializes the art of rhetoric. It doesn't allow students to see the breadth of what rhetoric can provide. And I don't think it shows ambition for our students. Then we need to think about the teaching. How does putting rhetoric into our curriculum in a carefully sequenced and progressive manner, how does it show that ambition we have for our students? Speakers before me have talked about that ambition for our students and teaching to the top, scaffolding upwards. And go back to what Stuart said at the beginning about slowing down and teaching things better. And we've mentioned Mary Marriott a few times, but I will go back to her teach less better concept. Is how do we ensure that our curriculum picks out the most important aspects of what we do, and that we cut out the noise around certain things. So for me, planning rhetoric over a 5-year curriculum, seeing it in different areas is really important. And that, I think that links back to ambition. If we see that sequence develop over a 5-year period, and we teach the key things about rhetoric, and we do the slow writing that Stuart was advocating, our students will be really well prepared when they sit their GCSEs. They will have true understanding of rhetoric, rather than relying on mnemonics and acronyms, for example. What we need to do also is, I'm a big fan and a big advocate of a conceptually based curriculum, that we map our curriculum not around skills, but around the concepts that we think students need to know. How do we help our students to develop a sense of philosophical thinking? How do we get them to question things which are in existence? How do we get them to think about what the evidence is for that argument? Is the argument based in fact and reality? How do we get our students to think philosophically from the very beginning in Year 7, and not just if we're teaching them how to create a speech or write an article or write a letter, that we get them to see it in all aspects of the curriculum. We've had presentations on literary theory today, and I think that philosophical thinking links with that. When we think about feminist readings of text and Marxist readings of text, how much does that depend on our ability to help our students think philosophically? And then the other thing that's really important in terms of ambition is that we want our students to communicate effectively. How can they communicate? What words have they got? What sentence structures have they got? What powerful knowledge can they enact in their speaking and in their writing? On the slide, what I've got is that, that language is the linchpin of civilization. And I think that links really well back to Hannah's talk about vocabulary and the importance of vocabulary. That if students don't have words, they often find it hard to access concepts. So we need to plan the two side by side. And I think that then leads us to planning a very robust curriculum. The final A that I want to refer to is, the third A I want to refer to is acquisition. So we can have all of the best thoughts in the world, but if we don't put these into our curriculum logically and sequentially, and see what we want to students to have at the end of the curriculum, and how we trace that back to the beginning of our curriculum and what's gone before in Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 1. Again, all our words could be empty rhetoric. So how do we ensure that our students acquire a conceptual framework? And I think one of the things that we need to think about, and I know there's a number of people doing this, and Mary Myatt talks about this as well, as does Christine Council, is the work that we've done in our department in the last few weeks, few months, has been facilitated by lockdown, that we've been able to consider the concepts we want in our curriculum. So I've divided them into literary concepts and philosophical concepts. Philosophical concepts such as power, responsibility, ambition, love, death, all of the big things that literature is about. Then alongside the concepts that they need to be able to access that, as Heidi's talked about in Macbeth, do they understand iambic pentameter? Do they understand the genre of tragedy? Do they understand the genre of comedy? And then we need to bring those back as well into what concepts do they need in rhetoric? What specific knowledge do we want students to know, and how have we mapped that out? How do we know that they can build from one idea to the next? I'm really interested in Yamina's work on multiple choice questions so that we can check the granular detail of what students have retained in their long-term memory. So what I would encourage departments to do is to sit down together and say, well, what is it we want our students to know? How do we map this over 5 years? How do we map this not just in units of work on rhetoric, but how do we help our students to apply that knowledge when they're studying, for example, an inspector calls in year 10 and year 11, or Lord of the Flies, for example, in year 7 perhaps, that we want them to be able to see that rhetoric is in poetry and in plays and in prose. It's not narrowly restricted to not literary non-fiction. And that leads me on to that final question. How do we do that? How do we map it? And how do we ensure that everyone in the department is equipped to teach to the highest possible point, but also understand how they can make that accessible by scaffolding for all of the students in our classes? And then that goes on to achievement. If we put all of these together, we're constantly thinking about what will our students achieve? What will it mean for them at 16 when they may leave us to go on to college or apprenticeships, or to stay with us into our sixth forms? What will it mean for them if they enter the world of work? How effectively will they be able to communicate? What was the rhetoric of the workplace? And how do we equipment for the life? Oh, really running out of time. So those, I'm going to go quickly through the rest of it. So I've tried to put a little visual model here. Teacher expertise converts to student expertise. We need to think about what we should teach and how we should teach it. So we're mindful of all of those. What do our teachers know? Where do we get our knowledge of rhetoric from? What do we read? How well do we read it? How do we share that? How do we know that every teacher has high level knowledge of rhetoric? How do we use CPD to support our departments? What consistency are we aiming for? Those are really important for me, that in a department that we have agreed set of knowledge and concepts that everybody in the department is able to contribute to, and that we use our best expertise within our departments and outside our departments to train our teachers to teach this really well. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more, I would recommend that you do start with Aristotle. I've put a few texts there. The other things that I would recommend as well are the Cambridge Companion to Aristotle, and also the very short introduction series. So I hope that's been useful for everybody. I hope you've managed to take something away from that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mary. There was a quotation that you used at the beginning where you said language is the linchpin of society. And I think us as English teachers carry a lot on our shoulders. And that summarises it a lot.
It is. It's like Hannah when she quoted Wittgenstein about language is I can't remember exactly, but it's the borders of our world, isn't it? If we restrict language, we restrict what our students can do. And it's good to see so many people who are passionate about bringing that into the classroom.
Yes, most definitely. Well, thank you so much. And I know that
you're very welcome.
So people will be firing questions at you, I'm sure. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Okie dokie. So next up we have Eleanor. Hi, Eleanor. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do you want to try bring up your PowerPoint? Check that everything's all working, all hunky-dory for us. Brilliant. And hopefully Tom will take away the 1 minute ticker at the bottom so you don't think that you've got only a minute to speak. So Eleanor's here to talk to us today about how we can teach people meaningfully to analyse structure. I'm an AQA examiner and I know how difficult that question 3 is from a structure point of view. And I think we're all a little scared of it as teachers sometimes. So I'm really fascinated to hear what you've got to say, Eleanor. So as you're up and running, all yours.
Great, thanks. So my name is Eleanor Larson. I'm the Director of English at Reach Academy Feltham, which is an all-through free school in West London. And yeah, today I'm going to talk to you about how I think we could teach pupils to meaningfully analyse structure. So often in the English classroom, we spend a disproportionate amount of time talking about language. From Key Stage 2 upwards, we teach pupils the vocabulary they need to identify increasingly complex techniques within extracts and quotations. So from verbs to assonance and zoomorphism and beyond. To combat feature spotting approaches, we then teach pupils how to zoom in for close word analysis and the general effects of such techniques. But can we all confidently say we dedicate equal time and thought to the structure of text? Are your pupils able to comment on as effectively on the writer's choices in their composition of extracts and whole texts? The GCSE examiner reports suggest not. And whilst you may not agree that the exam boards are the best measure of pupil learning, it's difficult to ignore the common trends that they're able to observe across the 500,000 pupils who sit English language and literature GCSEs every year. Different exam boards do require differing approaches to structure, which you can see on screen. So in Language Paper 1, whilst EdXL and OCR bring together language and structure in one question, followed by an evaluative question for which either could be commented on, AQA separate out the two, emphasising the need to comment on whole text direction as opposed to these smaller techniques. Regardless of their phrasing of questions, all of the exam boards recognise the importance of focusing on structure in both language and literature papers. Some recent examiner reports include the following, which I'll just give you a couple of seconds to scan through. And these. The main takeaways are things which I'm sure will be familiar to all of you. Pupils need to see texts as constructs, the crafted creations of the writers. Pupils also need to understand that methods include bigger whole text choices of development and change, not just those things at word or sentence level. And finally, that if pupils are taught to spot smaller structural features, such as short sentences, in order to answer a GCSE question, it should come as no surprise to any of us that they will do the same when analysing their literature texts. They must be taught to appreciate whole text choices, not just these granular ones. So, recognising the need to teach pupils to appreciate structure is one thing, but how can we do it? Attempts to answer this force us to consider an even bigger question. What is structure? Structure literally refers to the putting together of multiple parts. It's the makeup of something, a construct. And there are a number of ways which we can draw pupils' attention to the structure of text to get them thinking about its importance long before teaching them to answer a question on a GCSE paper. So first up is to separate the text direction and smaller structural techniques. It's really difficult for our pupils to follow our direction if we use the same word, structure, to describe multiple things. Agreeing on a shared language is important, and Sarah and Mary have both already spoken about that today. The phrase text direction can help to guide pupils through an active reading process, leading them to comment on which events take place in what order. Structural techniques, on the other hand, are more specific methods used within the text direction, for example, dialogue or sentence length. There's some suggestions of what those things could include here. It's moving between these two regularly, toggling between zooming in and zooming back out again. That's something we should be modelling to our pupils and giving them the time to practice. One really practical way to introduce this approach to your pupils is through the use of short video clips, watching them once to identify the text direction, i.e. what's literally happening in the text, and a second time to focus on those smaller structural techniques, for example, how camera angles can show a shift in perspective. Method number 2 is to normalise the interrogating of text. Now, this is all about questioning. Whatever age or stage your pupils are at right now, they will benefit from being encouraged to ask questions of the text themselves and of the choices which writers have made. For those reluctant to share their own opinions in class, it's especially important to model this process during or after the first reading of a text. These are some examples of questions you could use as prompts with your pupils, moving between the what, the how, and the why of writers' choices. Ultimately, we want the pupils to be thinking, why does the writer focus my attention on this thing at this specific point, given what happens earlier or later on in the text? Pupils who are able to generate their own questions and see that their teacher recognises that level of personal response as a desirable trait will be well on their way to reading literature as critics, which, as we've already heard today, is something we all really want to work towards. Third up is a more granular approach to explicitly teach the use of academic verbs. It's challenging for pupils to articulate their own critical commentary of a writer's structural choices if they don't have the language to do so. We can use words such as these on screen now as starting points in commenting on writers' structural decisions. What part in this text shocks us? By putting this moment here in the text, what is the writer trying to highlight to us? Is the writer manipulating us to feel a certain way? Finally, in order for pupils to meaningfully analyse structure, we must expose them to a range of genres. Different types of text make use of different structures, by which I mean that the texts follow a common direction. For example, adventure tales or Gothic literature. Through sequencing our text choices, we can upskill our pupils to be alert to common structural features and recognise subversions to those tropes themselves. One way to do this is to compile a collection of short stories or extracts to read with pupils alongside their main text in a scheme of work. With you guiding their interrogation of the text, they'll quickly begin to recognise the patterns which, as you heard earlier, will ensure success at GCSE, but more importantly, will develop young critics hungry for literature and brimming with their own independent ideas. So these are 4 approaches which we've been using in the English department at my school. I hope there's something there for you to take away and consider implementing in your own classroom or curriculum. Please tweet me any questions which you may have, or if you've got any other great ideas about teaching structure, please share them. I'd love to hear from you all and keep improving what we're doing, because as we've heard today, like, everyone's got so many great ideas. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope there was something there for you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. Encouraging active reading, I think, and not just hinging on those subject-specific terms. I think something really important. So thank you very much. Brilliant. Next up, we have Sophie. Hi, Sophie.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about yours because you're engaging us in the primary classroom.
I am, yes.
I think us as secondary school teachers, of which a vast majority of us on today, can really benefit from and having that kind of transition understanding in the knowledge. So I'm really excited for what you've got to talk about today. Is your PowerPoint all working?
It is. Let me give it a go. Okay.
Just thinking about it, I think. There we go. Brilliant. Yeah, you're all up and running. Brilliant. So over
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, I'm an upper key stage 2 teacher, and I've been English lead in 2 different schools now. And I wanted to talk about how to use the writing revolution in a primary classroom, which is a strategy I'm sure lots of you have heard of. But I'm always eager to hear from secondary school teachers, what do you want your year 7 writers to be able to do? And a lot of the feedback I get is that, you know, we send them up with these amazing grammatical definitions and they know how to use, or some of them know how to use subjunctive form. But really, we want them to be able to put together a grammatically correct sentence and be able to expand that sentence and maybe put them together to form a paragraph, and you can take them from there. And this is what we're working from, really. So, oh, there we go. A common problem I find, and a lot of my colleagues find in the children's writing, which was particularly worsened after the first lockdown, was that we found that their writing was exactly like how they were speaking. So it was full of slang and poor punctuation, and they didn't seem to be aware that they needed to use a different type of language, more formal type of language when they were writing. And this started to fix that for us. So it's published in the US, and it does seem at first, when I did read all of it, and I thought, oh, this does seem to be aimed more towards secondary school teachers. But the second half is more about essay writing. The first half is building it right up from those basic structures. So each activity is pitched at level 1 and level 2 ages, with level 1 being primary sort of age and level 2 at secondary. So the first half of this book is really brilliant for primary school, but the first chapter in particular is what I want to touch on today. It's become the basis of all of my writing lessons, and it's about sentences being the basic building blocks of writing. So we talk about with the children what actually makes a sentence a sentence. In Key Stage 2 particularly, it seems to be, in my experience, that the quantity of writing is often valued over the quality. So you might look at a child's writing and they've written a whole page and you think, wow, they've written a whole page, but when you actually read it, it doesn't make sense, or there's lots of misconceptions, lots of errors in there. Or the thing that I'm sure a lot of primary school teachers will get, where the children write a whole story. The first paragraph is brilliant because it's been crafted as a shared write or something, and then it sort of tails off towards the end and isn't great at the end. Well, the writing revolution really focuses on sentence level work, and the activities that it promotes encourages you to practice the sentence writing skills embedded in context. So any examples I use will quite often be linked to other areas in the curriculum. So for example, we're learning about Victorians at the moment. So any of these sentence activities will be based around the Victorians. It reduces their cognitive load. They don't have to use their imagination and think what they need to write, because they already know what they're going to write because they've learned about it, the Victorians. It's just how they're going to write it. And you'll see examples of this in a moment. So there are 5 activities building up to this sentence work, which help children understand the concept of a sentence. And I use them regularly in my English starters and rotate around them. So the first one is all about identifying fragments orally. And children are usually really instinctively good at this. So let's say I wrote this fragment being a grammatically incomplete sentence on the board, built a wooden horse, and just asked the children what is missing. And most of the children will be able to tell me, well, we don't know who built the wooden horse. This was when we were learning about Trojan horse. And in year 6, they need to know what the subject, verb and object is in the sentence. So we would use the terminology of that with year 6s and say, well, we know that the verb here is built and the object is a wooden horse, but missing subject, what could it be? It would be nice for it to be historically accurate, so we might ask them to finish it with what they know from their history lessons. But again, the children like to be a bit silly with it sometimes, and I say, as long as it's grammatically correct, we could say the frog built a wooden horse, or Mrs. White built a wooden horse. Just get them to understand what's actually missing from this to make it a grammatically complete sentence. And then from that, we'll go to writing them. So identifying standalone fragments, first of all. So initially, I would put a missing line where I want the children to add the words. And so with my year 5s and 6s, I would also expect them to be punctuating them correctly. But lower down the school, you might include the capital letters at the beginning, full stops at the end, and any other punctuation you might need. But after this, we'd move on to fragments on their own. And the children would have to choose where to add missing words to turn these fragments into sentences. So I'd expect every child to be able to do it with each one, but especially the more able, they might be able to work out different ways of turning them into sentences. So could you try adding words at the end rather than the beginning, or both the beginning and end? And how does that impact the sentence? And what different punctuation might you need depending on where the words are? So after identifying them standalone, we would then identify fragments in an extract or a piece of text. This is quite often where it goes wrong in their writing, especially when they're getting carried away and you start with some beautifully crafted sentences, and then as their imagination goes wild, they end up with some fragments and unfinished sentences throughout their writing. So we want to practice them identifying them in a piece of work they haven't written. So I'll save you the pain of reading this aloud, but this was an extract from our history lesson at the time, and we were learning about the Trojan horse. And so we'd read this aloud, always encourage the children to do that as when they're editing their work, because I'm sure you've done the same. When I've written a model piece of text and reading to the children, there'll always be at least one error, not that I've meant to do, but that's just happened. And it's quite nice to model to the children that, oh, see, even I'm making errors when I write, and it's important to read it aloud to notice them. So I'll read it aloud with the children, and they need to identify the fragments in that piece of text. And here I've shown them in red. So hopefully either with their partner or as a class, they'll have worked out the grammatically incomplete sentences, and they will then have to turn them into sentences. And here, depending on what context you choose to use them in, you'd expect them to complete them accurately rather than just using silly words to finish them. We then move on to unscrambling words to make a sentence. And I find the children see this as more of a game, really. I think they sort of forget that it's actually a good grammar activity. So again, I rarely come across a sentence where there's only one way of rearranging the words. And the children really like to come up with about 4 or 5 different versions of the sentences. And they always think of some that I haven't thought of. So in year 5 and 6, I would only here capitalise the proper nouns, but lower down the school, the teachers might capitalise what they want to be the first word of the sentence, just to give the children some more direction as to what order the words could go in to make a sentence. And again, especially with upper key stage 2, ask the children to experiment with punctuation and how that changes the meaning of the sentence. We then lastly move on to run-on sentences, which is another really common error I find in children's extended pieces of writing. So this would need some explicit teaching of what a run-on sentence is before, obviously. In their grammar lessons, they will have learnt about main clauses and conjunctions. So all the vocabulary mentioned here is something they would be confident with from previous lessons. So we'd give them sentences with 2 or more main clauses and ask them to separate them with either a piece of punctuation or a conjunction. And hopefully that helps them when they edit their own work, they can then spot their own run-on sentences. And I've given an example here of where I've experimented with different ways of correcting this particular run-on sentence. So at first, you'd want the children to experiment with different punctuation, not comma splicing, of course, as that being a really common error, is that children can't accurately use commas. So we try and stay away from that, especially in run-on sentences, and use dashes, full stops, semicolons, conjunctions. And first of all, they'd experiment with those, but then you might move the conversation on to why would you use a dash instead of a semicolon, or why would you use this conjunction instead of that, and what effect does that have? And you can get some really interesting conversations out of that, just focusing on the effect of using a different piece of punctuation. So here it's worked really well with giving feedback. So again, their children's pieces of work I find are littered with comma splices or run-on sentences, and it would take a long time marking them and working out how to talk that through with the children. But now that this is part of their starters every day, all I really need to do, as you can see here on the second line, is I've circled this child's comma splice and just written run-on in the margin. And she's corrected it there with a full stop and starting a new sentence. So that's turned that into a really quick process. As the children get more confident, you then hope that they'd identify those errors themselves, but this was when run-on sentences were fairly new to them. And here's another example of where a fragment has been used, and the child's tried to correct it by inserting a colon. I'm not sure brilliantly works here, but it just shows that they are understanding what a fragment is and they're trying to correct it at least. Obviously, you'd hope that they'd move on to be able to maybe add words or take words away to make that better. And then after looking at what a sentence is and how to form a grammatically correct one, we'd look at how to expand sentences to make them more interesting. So in the writing revolution, they call these type of sentences kernel sentences. And I think the phrase popcorn sentence is something I did. I don't think that particular bit is in the writing revolution, but we talked as a class that, you know, popcorn is the kernel that's exploded. So if we add more detail to the kernel sentence, then it becomes a popcorn sentence. I've got my cats jumping up here. So with the monster roared, I'd give them 3 basic questions: when, where, and why, and ask the children to answer just in simple phrases about this kernel sentence. At first, I'm really explicit with how I want them to structure these. So we'd always put the when at the beginning as an adverbial of time. So they would start with here, seconds later, the monster roared outside the window to intimidate Connor. So first of all, the structure is really explicitly taught, and then we can start talking about how you would move those phrases around to vary the sentence structure. There's an example here of a child using it in their writing. So they've put, he looked out the window and then answered when, where, and why. And you can see they've used phrases for when and where, but this child's used the main clause for why. And we had the discussion about if we just added that on the end, he heard a noise outside, it would be a run-on sentence. So this was quite a high ability child, and they knew to separate that with a colon so it wasn't a run-on sentence. So
20 seconds, Sophie. Sorry, 20 seconds.
At 3:01 a.m., he looked out the window in his bedroom, colon, he heard a noise outside. So it's just a good way of expanding that and adding more detail. I just wanted to add this onto the end. Tarjinder and Tim, other primary school teachers that have done a lot of work on how to use the writing revolution at primary. But yeah, that's it for me. So thank you very much for listening.
About that, we often put a lot of stress on the quantity over the quality of the sentences that our pupils are constructing. And at Key Stage 3, we do vast quantities when we're looking at writing at my school around super sentences and building those sentences. So it's always useful to know what you've already done. You've built those foundations to where we can take it so that they're not allowed to forget it. So yes, thank you so much. That's really brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well done, Sophie. Cheers. Okay. What are we thinking so far, Lizzie?
I'm blown away by the caliber of speakers. That's what I'm thinking currently, and I'm taking away and learning lots myself.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Even though I'm not an English teacher, I can appreciate the quality of the presentations has been absolutely outstanding. Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. So what we're going to do now, just before we go off for our lunch and screen break, is I just want to play you. I know we talked to Brett at the very beginning from Pupil Progress, and also we talked to Mark from Welby as well. We didn't talk to him, but we played one of his videos. So I'm just going to play the first video from Pupil Progress now, which explains how their software actually works. It's only 1 minute, so stay with us, and then we'll talk about arrangements for this afternoon.
So what we have created are trackers that will calculate the grade exactly as the exam board calculates the grade to take away all that heavy lifting from you. Everything is calculated using grade boundaries from the very latest exam series. You can also select and also adjust with percentage challenge before updating your tracker. Everything is RAG rated against the student's minimum target grade. We have added an average row that will tell you how students are performing in key areas of the course across the whole entire class or cohort. We have a summary area that provides key information. Using Katniss Everdeen as an example, you can see that she has a target grade of a 7, currently working at a 6. For her to achieve that 7, she needs 7 more marks. Really useful information when strategically planning future lessons. It is incredibly easy to add multiple past papers to your tracker. Simply select the paper, name that paper, choose if you want to include this in the calculation of the working out grade, select the class you want that to appear on, and it will appear in the tracker instantly, ready to add data. You can, of course, add end of topic test or adjusted mocks. This is an example for paper 1 that is an adjusted mock covering section B. You can even tag each question of this adjusted mock against the relevant AOs so that it informs how students are doing in those key assessment objectives. When you open your tracker and add data, you can see it starts to feed into that topic summary area live. This will also collate any other data from questions tagged against specific assessment objectives. We also have an individual student report that collates all of the key information and presents it in one easy to read document. Schools that used us in the last round of Centre Assessed Grades shared how this became pivotal in their discussions with parents and students with regard to the decisions made. Please remember that you can access this system at no cost to you or the school using our grant-enabled access. There is no commitment to continue after this subscription, and you'll be able to use it all the way up until the 31st of August this year. So just click the link and get yourself going today.
That was Brett from Pupil Progress. Thanks so much to Brett. Now, I think, Lizzie, what we're going to do is just when we come back from lunch, I will play the Wellbe the second Wellbe video when we come back. But what I wanted to do now is just explain to people, in a second, we're going to finish this broadcast. So this broadcast is going to end. So it's going to go. We're then going to start a new broadcast for the afternoon sessions. So there will be a new YouTube link, a new stream appearing on the TM English Icons Twitter account. And you'll need to access those new links to then tune in live. Just to reiterate, the recording and the resources for all of today, including the PDFs of all the presentations where permission has been granted, will be available as well if you just check the TM English Icons account. And in fact, I might just put the link on screen now for that so you know where that is. So if you want to sign up, you just have to enter that address, put your email in, and then within about 24 hours, you'll be able to access the recording and resources from today's event. I'm going to hand over to Lizzie just briefly now to explain what's coming up, hopefully this afternoon as well. Maybe.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Tom. So hopefully you'll all be able to make that transition over. Feel a bit like when you go from BBC One to BBC Two. That's essentially what we're doing, moving to a second one, so that we can chunk it down a little bit when we do share those resources afterwards. So please do sign up. We've got a lunch break now, and we're running pretty good to time, which is a first. So clearly that's an online thing rather than a face-to-face thing. We have two more brilliant keynotes after the break, Freya Adele and Becky Wood, as well as a second session of our Teach Meets 10-minute slots, again with a really broad range of topics that we're going to talk about. And then we have another guest speaker, Wada Yassin, at the end, who's going to come and share some of her poetry with us as well. So keep using the hashtag, keep sending us your selfies. I'm very sorry it's not a TES lunch. When you come to face-to-face sessions, they are something to behold. So next time when we're back face-to-face, but we'll see you all at 1:15. So I'll see you back on the other channel at 1:15. See you